Chapter 1607. Elder Yujingzuan choked, and hesitation flashed in his eyes. But it was only for a moment, and his expression quickly returned to normal, and he vowed firmly, "I really don't know." Rong Xiu's smile deepened, but it carried a bit of cold sarcasm. "After the patriarch fainted, you were the first to find out, and then you called Elder Tong Chuan over. Now, the reason why the patriarch fainted is clear. It was Elder Tong Chuan who sealed him. Don't you think there's something wrong with the timing?" Elder Yujingzuan was at a loss for words, and after hesitating for a moment, he explained this, he must have attacked the patriarch first. Then he pretended that nothing happened, and pushed all the blame away. It must be like this. There's one thing you might not know. After the seal was placed, the patriarch's body could no longer accept the force from the outside world. Naturally, this includes the force in the human body. Elder Yujingzuan suddenly realized something, and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. He looked up at Rong Xiu in shock, but only saw the man's eyes that seemed to have seen through everything. Your Highness." His lips squirmed, as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't make a sound. Rong Xiu's words were very clear. Everyone's eyes fell on him, but at this moment, he felt as if there was a knife on his back. His mind was blank, and only a voice echoed in his mind. "It's over, it's really over, plop." Elder Yujingzuan suddenly knelt down, and his knees heavily smashed on the jade bricks, producing a dull sound that made one's teeth ache. He pressed his head against the ground and begged, "Your Highness. I admit, I followed Elder Tong Chuan's orders and went in first to attack the patriarch, but I really don't know." Bailey Jun's strength had increased greatly after coming out of seclusion. Although he had suffered a blow because of Jiang Jiwan's matter, his combat strength was still not to be underestimated. At that time, the two of them went in together, and he made the first move, followed by Elder Tong Chuan. Elder Tong Chuan had only said that he wanted to push all the blame onto Rong Xiu and pull him down from the position of Holy Son. Honorable Elder Yujing originally didn't want to do this, but after thinking about it and under Honorable Elder Tong Chuan's persuasion, he finally agreed. But he only thought that Senior Tong Chuan was after the position of Patriarch and Holy Son. Who would have thought that he was actually someone from the Black Demon Cave? In the end, he was also wronged. However, Rong Xiu had already turned his gaze slightly and looked toward 36 respected Elder Ming. "I still need to see the patriarch. I'll leave these matters to you." 36 respected Elder Ming nodded. "Rest assured, Your Highness." After Rong Xiu finished speaking, he lifted his foot and walked outside. Honored Elder Yujing still wanted to beg, but he was intimidated by 36 Honored Elder Ming's gaze, and his entire body trembled. He shut his mouth. The room was silent. Everyone's eyes were still unconsciously following Rong Xiu. When he reached the door, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, half turned around, raised his eyebrows, and chuckled. "From today onwards, you don't have to worry about the patriarch." Many people's faces alternated between red and white. In the end, they responded in unison and bowed respectfully. Yes. After Rong Xiu left, the room was still silent for a long time. Today's battle was really too thrilling. Thinking about it carefully, many people secretly felt miserable. With Rong Xiu's thoughts and methods, if he wanted to deal with them, it was really too easy. To think that they were actually naive enough to think that they could fight against him, it seemed that the best choice in the future was to obediently listen to all his orders. 36 respected Elder Ming looked around and laughed. "Everyone, it's time for us to settle the score today, right?" When Rong Xiu walked out of the main hall, Yan Qing, who was waiting outside, hurriedly came forward to welcome him. "Your Highness. UMO sent news that the matter is almost settled." Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. "He's really fast. Your Highness has already arranged everything before, so it's natural that you're quick to pull in the net." Rong Xiao glanced at him and smiled. Your acting skills have also improved. A rare look of embarrassment appeared on Yan Qing's iceberg-like face. Your Highness, you flatter me. These are all what I should do. Rong Xiao kindly let him off and did not continue to tease him. He moved his feet and headed in the direction of Duming Peak. Is the patriarch awake? Not yet, Your Highness. Rong Xiao's expression was indifferent. It's indeed a little troublesome to deal with that seal. Although he himself had escaped a calamity back then, it did not mean that he could easily break it. This seal was considered one of the top secret techniques of the Black Demon Cave, and there were very few people who knew about it. If he wanted to completely solve it, he was afraid that it would take some effort. Your Highness, about the princess consort, Yan Qing spoke hesitantly. Since the trouble here has been solved, you should be able to ask the princess consort to come back, right? Rong Xiao's thin crimson lips curled up slightly, and his eyes softened. When this matter is over, I will personally go to the Phoenix God Mountain to pick her up. Previously, he pretended to rush back to the Yuntian Tower and did not tell her the truth. In fact, he wanted to take care of these things before bringing her back. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was enough for her to worry about. Yan Qing was taken aback, but immediately returned to normal and responded respectfully. As they spoke, the two had already reached the top of Duming Peak. Rong Xiao flew down and landed on a black jade stone. The soldiers in charge of guarding around saluted in unison. Greetings, Your Highness. He did not know if it was an illusion, but the iron-blooded aura on their bodies today seemed to be stronger than before. Rong Xiao gently nodded and walked toward the sacrificial god temple. Yan Qing followed closely behind. Wherever he passed, all the soldiers knelt on one knee to welcome him. They all knew that the Yuntian Tower, which looked calm on the surface, had set off a bloody storm again. Rong Xiao walked to the door of the sacrificial god temple and suddenly stopped. By the way, how are the preparations for the wedding going? Yan Qing immediately replied respectfully. Your Highness, it is basically ready. The preparations began a few years ago, and a lot of manpower and material resources of the Yuntian Tower were used. How could it not be ready? Rong Xiao nodded, and there seemed to be a stream of light flashing through his phoenix eyes. When I bring her back, we can choose a good day for the wedding. Digression, today's February was sealed by the cold, so it was even more early. I will make it up tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1608. As the sun rose, the dark sky gradually brightened. The last light in the Phoenix Shrine quietly went out. A gentle breeze blew, and the white mist slowly dissipated, revealing the figures of the people sitting quietly in the plaza. Chu Luyue exhaled slowly and opened her eyes. The energy of heaven and earth here was abundant and pure. Cultivating here was almost twice as effective as cultivating outside. Therefore, when she was waiting for Tuanzi outside the door, she didn't waste any time and divided part of her mind to cultivate. After breaking through to High God, her efficiency in absorbing origin power had increased significantly. Naturally, her cultivation speed had increased as well. There were a total of 3 stages in High God: early stage, middle stage, and peak stage. The difference between these 3 stages was not small. Currently, she was only at the early stage. If she wanted to continue breaking through, she would have to work hard. After the refinement of the pure origin power, her spirit had recovered significantly. Her pair of jade-like eyes were sparkling. She glanced at the entrance of the Phoenix Shrine. Dumpling had already been in there for 3 days, but there were still no signs of her coming out. Yi Zhao was accompanying her inside, so of course, he had not come out. Chu Luyue hesitated for a moment, but still looked to the side. Elder Yi, you had left yesterday. It seemed that his subordinates had discovered that Fenghuang Valley was severely damaged and had asked him to return to take a look. It made sense. In the past month, she could not remember how many Tianlei she had triggered. Although these Tianlei had been absorbed by Dumpling, the energy fluctuations in the process had still affected Fenghuang Valley. Chu Luiyue felt a rare sense of guilt. She wanted to go with him. However, Elder Yu waved his hand and told her to continue waiting for Dumpling. As for the rest, she could leave it to them. This was their territory anyway. When it came to repairing it, Chu Luiyue did not know as much as they did. In the face of Chu Luiyue's apology, Elder Yu's attitude became even more carefree. You've already helped Dumpling open her fourth meridian, what's this small matter? Dumpling's significance to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was immeasurable. Even if Fenghuang Valley was destroyed, they would have nothing to say. Fenghuang Valley could be rebuilt, but there might not be a second Dumpling. Since the other party said so, Chu Luiyue did not insist. After the first day, Elder Yi Gong never appeared again. Thus, at this moment, there were 3 other elders waiting outside the palace. Chu Luiyue looked at Elder Yi Shang, who was the closest to him. Elder Yi Shang, pardon me for asking, but does the ancestral worship always take so long? Elder Yi Shang looked back and smiled gently. Under normal circumstances, the young lord only needs 1 day to worship the ancestors. But Dumpling is a little special. It's normal for her to take a little longer. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. Of course, she was clear on this point. But it had already been 3 days, and there was no movement at all. This made her feel nervous. Then, do you know how long it will take? Elder Yi Shang shook his head. This depends on her. Although there had been pure-blooded members of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan in the past, no one had ever summoned the ancestral spirit. This was Dumpling's first time. They did not have much experience, so they did not say much. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding, and could only continue waiting patiently. Luckily, she and Dumpling could sense each other. She felt that there should be no problem. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue felt a slight fluctuation in her energy center. Her expression froze. Moments later, the fluctuation came again, and this time, it was clearly bigger than the first time. It came from that water droplet. In the unseen world, there seemed to be something vaguely summoning. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the summoning. She immediately held her breath. This power seemed to be coming from the Phoenix Shrine. She looked around her. Everyone's expression was normal, and there seemed to be no difference. This power seemed to be summoning only her. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. She could feel that this summoning power was extremely vast and powerful, with an astonishing pressure that could not be defied. Even Yi Zhao from before couldn't be compared to him. It was just that this power was very gentle to her, so although it fell on her body, it did not make her feel uncomfortable. In an instant, a ridiculous and bold guess flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Who else could possess such summoning power other than the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan who had been worshipped by the Phoenix Divine Hall for generations? But she was the only human here, and the only connection between her and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was Dumpling. How could, suddenly, Chu Luiyue's thoughts came to a decision. Could it be because of Dumpling? Gradually, the fluctuation became stronger and stronger, and Chu Luiyue could no longer ignore it. Finally, before Chu Luiyue took the initiative to speak, the door of the Phoenix Shrine suddenly opened. Creak, this long and vicissitude sound was particularly clear in the quiet square. Everyone raised their heads and looked in the direction of the door. The expressions of Yi Shang and the others turned solemn. It seemed that the clan leader and Dumpling were about to come out. Yi Zhao's figure quickly appeared behind the door. He lifted his foot and stepped out of the door. Everyone bowed respectfully. Greetings, clan leader. Many people breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the ancestral worship inside was finally over. However, there were some more observant people who quickly realized that Dumpling did not follow them out. Logically speaking, the two of them should have come out together. Yi Zhao's gaze fell directly on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Luiyue could clearly see the complicated emotion surging in Yi Zhao's eyes. Then, he heard Yi Zhao say, "Sheng Wanyu, you go in." These few simple words stunned everyone on the spot. Some even rubbed their ears, thinking that they were hallucinating. Some looked at each other, and from the shock in each other's eyes, they confirmed the clan leader's words. Yi Shang and the others were also stunned. Although Sheng Wanyu had entered the Phoenix Shrine twice before, it was under special circumstances. But it was different now. Dumpling was inside worshipping her ancestors. Why was Sheng Wanyu suddenly asked to go in at this time? However, when they saw Yi Zhao's serious expression, they did not dare to ask too much. They subconsciously looked at Chu Luiyue. As expected, Chu Luiyue calmed down, nodded slightly, and walked directly to the main hall. Everyone's eyes unconsciously followed her movements. When she brushed past Yi Zhao, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that Yi Zhao was sizing her up. The look in his eyes was different from his usual expression. Although he looked calm on the surface, it was obvious that the waves in his heart had not calmed down. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment, then continued to walk into the Phoenix Shrine without looking sideways. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1609. The door slowly closed, completely blocking Chu Luiyue's figure and blocking everyone's sight, including Yi Zhao. After being stunned for a while, Yi Shang couldn't help but ask, "Clan leader, you aren't going in with us?" Yi Zhao nodded expressionlessly. This reaction was really hard to fathom. Elder Yi Shang frowned. This was obviously not the clan leader's intention. No matter how much he doted on Dumpling, he wouldn't summon Sheng Wanyu into the Phoenix Temple at this time. Unless, this was the ancestors' intention. Other than that, no one else in the entire clan could be above the clan leader. This, Elder Yi Shang was speechless and didn't know how to react. The ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had fallen tens of thousands of years ago during the sacrifice to the heavens. Only a remnant of his consciousness remained in the Phoenix Temple. In the long years, this consciousness had basically been in a deep sleep. This consciousness would only awaken when every generation of patriarch worshipped their ancestors. However, it would often continue to fall into a deep sleep after the sacrifice. But now, this consciousness actually woke up when Dumpling worshipped the ancestors, and it even allowed Sheng Wanyu to enter. How could this not be shocking? Elder Yi Zhao asked worriedly. Then, "Clan leader, is Dumpling doing well? Could something have happened to her?" Yi Zhao nodded. "Everything is normal inside, don't worry." Since the ancestors' consciousness had awakened, there was naturally a reason. At first, when he realized the ancestors' intention, he was also shocked, but now he had chosen to accept it. Perhaps it was because of the contract between her and Dumpling. Yi Zhao didn't say anything else. He just stood outside the door with his hands behind his back and waited quietly. No one dared to ask any more and could only continue to wait. Countless people had the same question in their minds. Sheng Wanyu, a human, entered the Phoenix Temple during the sacrifice to the ancestors. How should this be counted? Hearing the sound of the door closing, Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. Yi Zhao didn't follow in, but the summoning wave in her dantian was getting stronger. This wave drove her forward. Although she had been here twice before, she had been in a hurry. She hadn't had the chance to properly size up the most sacred place of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. On the black jade slab, Her figure was clearly reflected, as well as the specks of starlight above the dome. Although the sky was already bright, it still couldn't hide the bright light. Walking here would often give people the illusion that they were taking a stroll in the night sky full of stars. Chu Luiyue walked through the hall and crossed the threshold. She could clearly feel that the ripples in her body had become stronger. That voice came from the mural, as if it had flowed through thousands of years of wind and frost. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She put Dumpling down, cupped her fists, and bowed respectfully. Junior Shengguan, you greet Senior. No need to be so polite. That voice seemed to have a hint of a gentle smile. Dumpling has already told me everything between the two of you. You are indeed very good to her. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. From this tone, the other party seemed to like Dumpling very much, and even his attitude towards her was much better. I let you in today because I want to see what kind of person can make Dumpling so dependent and close to him, and even be willing to give up the position of clan leader. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she asked warily, Senior also wants me to break the contract with Dumpling? Of course not. The other party smiled. You don't have to be nervous. Since I gave the Taoist soul to Tuanzi before, I won't care about this. No matter what, the position of clan leader will be hers in the future. Only then did Chu Luiyue feel relieved. She said with some embarrassment, this junior misunderstood. Please don't take it to heart. Yi Zhao and the others were quite rude to you before, so it's normal for you to be like this. But if there's anything rude, I hope you can let it go. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue suddenly had a very subtle feeling in her heart. This ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan seems to be a little too polite to her. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1610. As an ancient divine beast, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had always been very arrogant. This was especially so in front of humans. And this was the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. Speaking of which, it was not an exaggeration to say that she had the status of a supreme being. Although this was only a remnant consciousness, the other party's identity was still full of deterrence. Even if she had a contract with Dumpling, the other party didn't seem to have to give her face like this, right? Countless thoughts flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, but her expression was normal as she said with a smile, You're too polite. Dumpling has been with me for many years, and we've gone through life and death together countless times. We're already as close as family. I know that what clan leader Yi Zhao and the others did was for the good of Dumpling. I'm more than happy and gratified. This was the truth. Chu Luiyue admitted that her temper was not good. This time, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had done a lot of things. If it was in the past, she would definitely not tolerate it. However, she knew that in the end, they were also doing it for Dumpling. Considering this point, she could ignore all those things. To her, all those things were not as important as Dumpling. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Luiyue felt her legs go soft. She looked down and saw Dumpling hugging her thigh, looking at her with tears in her grape-like eyes. Ah, you. Dumpling called her name coquettishly and intimately, full of nostalgia and dependence. She knew that Ah You was the best to her. Chu Luiyue smiled and touched her head. I have a question for you. That voice sounded again. Chu Luiyue nodded. Senior, please speak. The other party paused for a moment before saying word by word, Where did you get that thing in your body? The hall fell into dead silence. The moment Chu Luiyue heard that sentence, she understood that it was referring to the water droplet in her dantian. She paused for a moment. She knew that there was no need for her to play dumb at this time. This junior accidentally obtained it a few years ago. Oh. The other party seemed a little surprised. Then you didn't go and look for the rest of them in the past few years. Chu Luiwa suddenly looked up. 10,000 miles away. The islands were scattered and the mountain ranges were continuous. This was the territory of the great phoenix dragon race. The tallest mountain peak in the center was even more majestic. All of a sudden, a furious dragon roar came from a cave halfway up the mountain. Roar! His aura shook the heavens, causing many great phoenix dragons to look over in shock. What's going on? Judging from his voice, it seems to be Elder Mao Yao. Looks like Elder Mao Yao has almost fully recovered. There was a hint of mockery in the voice. It must have been tough for you to recuperate for so long. Sho! Lower your voice. If someone hears it and reports it to Elder Mao Yao, you'll have to bear the consequences. Don't forget what happened to those who followed him to Lingshao College. Tisk, is there a need for that? I didn't say anything, did I? At most, I'm just concerned about Elder Mao Yao's health. Moreover, it is not just us. There are quite a number of elders in the clan who are criticizing Elder Mao Yao. This was a tactful way of saying it. Ever since Mao Yao had brought people to the Spiritual Firmament Academy with the intention of finding trouble with Shengguan Yu and Shengguan Jing, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon Tribe's attitude towards Mao Yao had changed greatly after that. He was a dignified elder with a noble status and extraordinary strength. Originally, he went to settle the score with them and brought back the corpse. But in the end, not only did he come back with injuries all over his body, but he even allowed them to take the corpse as their own. The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon Tribe had been utterly humiliated. How could they not have any resentment in their hearts? However, due to Mao Yao's status as an elder and the fact that he was injured when he came back, the patriarch did not punish him. But in private, everyone in the race was already very dissatisfied with Mao Yao. Even when they heard his voice, they felt extremely annoyed. Let's talk less. Even if we really want to punish him, it's the patriarch and the other elders' business. It's not up to us to speak. I'd like to see how Elder Mao Yao plans to make up for this matter. That's enough. It's useless to be angry now. You've just recovered, so don't be so irritable. In the cave, a tall and burly figure stood with his hands behind his back. He looked to be about 50 years old. His appearance was ordinary, but he was hale and hearty. His hair was purple and gold, and his deep eyes seemed to be all-encompassing. They were as deep as a cold lake that could not be explored. This person was the patriarch of the great phoenix dragon race, Mao Yang. In front of him was a huge great phoenix dragon. It was obvious that it had been injured. Although its wounds had mostly healed, the newly grown scales were still particularly eye-catching. Mao Yang's eyes were filled with resentment. These were all the scales that he had plucked out from his damaged scales and regrown them. No one else could understand the pain he had gone through. Does that mean that Shengguan Yu survived that disaster unscathed? Mao Yang said. Not exactly unscathed. I heard that she was bedridden for almost a month. Then she's still alive. Mao Yang said angrily. She's really lucky. Something so big had happened in the Spiritual Firmament Academy, and Shengguan Yu had put herself in danger, but she had managed to survive. Mao Yang narrowed his eyes. He did not agree with Mao Yang's words. I think that Shengguan Yu relied on more than just luck. After all, she personally repaired Lingshao College's sky shuttle array. How could an ordinary person do that? Either she has a trump card, or someone helped her. But no matter what, it proves that she's not simple. In that case, it was reasonable for her to be able to win against Mao Yao in that bet. You were too careless previously. Mao Yang said bluntly. Mao Yao was speechless. In fact, he had already realized this point, but he was unwilling to admit it. So what if he admitted it? The result was already decided. Paw! He swung his long tail, and the hard dragon scales scraped against the mountain wall. "Next time, I won't let her have it easy," Mao Yang suddenly said. "Do you still remember that about a month ago, Yi Zhao personally wrote a letter to Lingxiao College's dean, Nan Suhui, asking Sheng Wanyu to go to Phoenix Mountain?" "Of course." Mao Yao gritted his teeth. He had deliberately spread the news that Sheng Wanyu had formed a contract with the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. In the end, Yi Zhao and the others acted quickly. "Why? Is there a result now?" Mao Yang paused. "Not really. It's just that Sheng Wanyu hasn't come out of Phoenix Mountain yet. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestral worship ceremony will be held during this period. Digression, I'm going out for a while. I'll continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1611. How could the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan allow a human to stay in Phoenix Godly Mountain during such an important occasion? Something was obviously wrong. "You mean," Mao Yao was delighted at first, but then he hesitated. "But that's not very likely. Sheng Wanyu has a high status in the human race. If the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan really went overboard with her, then I'm afraid the human race won't agree." Mao Yang nodded. "That's what I find strange." According to his speculation, Yi Zhao and the others should directly ask Sheng Wanyu to terminate the contract with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. Due to various considerations, they shouldn't really want to kill Sheng Wanyu. It wasn't difficult to solve this problem, and it wouldn't take more than a month. After all, their ancestral worshipping ceremony was still in progress. Sheng Wanyu was still there. Could it be that she was also participating in the ancestral worshipping ceremony? That was too ridiculous. Sheng Wanjing has been waiting outside Phoenix Godly Mountain. He didn't follow them in. Mao Yang lowered his eyes and pondered for a moment. Our people can't get too close. That's all we can find out. The two ancient divine beast clans had always been in a subtle competitive relationship. They paid special attention to each other's every move. However, there was also an unspoken rule between them: they would never step into each other's territory. Moreover, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was holding their ancestral worshipping ceremony. Naturally, their people would be more careful. Therefore, this was the only information that could be found. If Sheng Wanyu is still waiting, it means that nothing has happened to her. Mao Yao was frustrated. What are Yi Zhao and the others doing? No matter what they are planning, the dignity of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan cannot be challenged. This time, Sheng Wanyu will definitely terminate the contract with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. As for the legendary three-eyed eagle, I don't know what they will do with it. Speaking of this, Mao Yao's expression changed slightly, and then he sneered. I almost forgot about it if clan leader didn't mention it. How proud was Yi Zhao? Their clansmen had formed a contract with a human, and they were even working together with a legendary three-eyed eagle. This was simply a great humiliation. In my opinion, he will definitely kill that legendary three-eyed eagle as well. Mao Yang nodded thoughtfully. If that's the case, that would be great. After that, our clan can find an opportunity to bring the corpse back. Only then could he regain the face that he had lost previously. Forget it, let's wait a little longer. Mao Yang shook his head. As long as there were no accidents, things would basically go according to their expectations. Rest well. With that, Mao Yang turned around, intending to leave. Patriarch. Mao Yao quickly called out to him. She was just standing here, but the other party had already seen through her thoroughly. Any lies and cover-ups seemed particularly weak at this time. Since it has recognized you as its master, it's your mission to find the remaining parts. As the voice fell, a ball of reddish gold flames suddenly flew out of the mural. It went straight for Chu Luyue. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. A golden light flashed in front of Chu Luyue's eyes. At this moment, she almost subconsciously wanted to retreat. However, at the same time, an ethereal voice sounded in her mind. She couldn't hear what the voice was saying, but she knew what it meant. Therefore, she held her breath and ordered herself to stand still. The ball of flame flew in front of Chu Luyue in an instant. It was only a distance of a fist. The blazing temperature almost made the strands of hair in front of Chu Luyue's forehead burn. Her face was boiling hot, and her eyes reflected the resplendent flames. Suddenly, there seemed to be an invisible hand that pulled Dumpling to the side. Dumpling struggled and refused to let go. Unfortunately, this little bit of strength was not enough in front of the ancestor. Boom! With a loud explosion, the ball of flames suddenly exploded. It turned into countless sparks and fell around Chu Luyue's body. Those flames directly passed through her clothes in the blink of an eye and drilled into her body. The intense burning sensation instantly engulfed her entire body. Ugh! Chu Luyue groaned and almost fainted from the intense and terrible pain. However, at the same time, a stream of light suddenly flashed in between her eyebrows. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 16:12. The moment the light flashed, the scorching temperature made Chu Luyue subconsciously raise her hand to wipe it away. The space between her brows was smooth and flat. However, the feeling of being burned just wouldn't go away no matter how hard he tried. Chu Luyue's entire body was engulfed by the crazy pain, but it was nothing compared to the pain between her brows. All of her attention was focused on the space between her eyebrows. Bang! Her legs went weak and she knelt on one knee on the ground. Ah, you! Dumpling shouted worriedly as tears welled up in her eyes. She waved her small hands and struggled with all her might to rush over. However, the ancestor's strength was too strong. He trapped her on the spot and she could only watch from afar. Ah, you! Dumpling's voice was choked with sobs. She couldn't bear to see Ah You suffer, especially, surrounded by flames. Looking at the burning flames, the scene from back then kept flashing in her mind. Back then, there was also a fire in the royal ancestral hall in Tianling that took Ah Yu's life and separated them. When a similar scene played out again, it was naturally a huge blow to Dumpling. She'll be fine. Looking at Dumpling's teary and sad appearance, the ancestor couldn't help but sigh. If I kill her now, wouldn't I be killing you? It wasn't easy for it to wait for such a dumpling, so it naturally couldn't bear to do that. Dumpling looked over in a daze. Really? But you looked like she was in pain. Don't worry, why would I lie to you? Dumpling was still young, and the ancestor knew that she only had Shangguanyu in her heart. It was useless to say anything else, so he could only persuade her like this. Dumpling wiped her tears and pursed her lips to hold back her sobs. If anything happens to Yu, I don't want the position of young master or the clan leader anymore. Regardless of life and death, she would follow Yu. About half an hour later, all the burning flames entered Chu Luyue's body. Her tendons, bones, blood, and flesh seemed to have been enveloped by the scorching heat. Draw the power of these flames into your dantian. That ancient and distant voice sounded again. Chu Luyue gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand up. Her movements were very slow, and every time she moved, the pain in her body seemed to increase. When she finally managed to sit cross-legged, her vision had already turned black, and she could barely see anything clearly. Afterward, she took a deep breath and placed her hands on her knees, circulating the origin power in her body with great difficulty. Those flames were like a flood, crazily surging all over her body, rampaging everywhere. The pressure it contained was so strong that Chu Luyue almost couldn't control it. He could only grit his teeth and use all his strength to slowly draw it into his dantian. Sizzle, a tiny flame touched her yuan meridian, and Chu Luyue could clearly hear an ear-piercing burning sound. This kind of bone-deep pain was indescribable. Chu Luyue's face instantly turned pale. She closed her eyes, frowned, and relied on her willpower to hold on. She didn't make a sound, and only her slightly trembling body showed the pain she was experiencing. After the first fireball landed, the second fireball quickly followed, landing not far away from the first one. Chu Luyue's body suddenly trembled, and the smell of rust spread between her lips and teeth. Afterward, those flames scattered freely on Chu Luyue's yuan meridian. And the area between her eyebrows became even hotter. Actually, this wasn't the first time Chu Luyue felt this kind of feeling. Previously, when she rushed out of the spring in Thousand Wine Mountain and summoned the divine realm back, the area between her eyebrows also hurt faintly. It was just that the situation was critical at that time, and she didn't pay attention to it. After the great calamity, she was unconscious for a month. When she woke up again, she completely threw this matter to the back of her mind. Until now, that kind of pain was hard to describe. It was like an extremely sharp knife with a scorching temperature was ruthlessly carving at the area between her eyebrows. Chu Luyue's physical strength had always been outstanding, and her tolerance for pain was even more extraordinary. To be able to torture her to such an extent, the pain and difficulty of the process could be imagined. Dumpling watched from not far away, and another string of tears fell. Poof! A slight cracking sound could be heard. It was a small hole that suddenly exploded on the back of Chu Luyue's hand. At a glance, it looked like an extremely sharp blade was used to quickly cut it open. There was no blood dripping down, but the wound was still scarlet red. Soon, more holes appeared on her body. Her originally white and jade-like skin started to become a ghastly sight at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dumpling's heart seemed to be squeezed into a ball by something, and her eyes were red. She almost didn't dare to look, but she also refused to look away. Ah, you! Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, it was evening again. The brilliant afterglow scattered, and the entire Phoenix Shrine seemed to be plated with a layer of bright light. It's already been a day. Why hasn't Shangguan Yu come out yet? Elder Yishang didn't know how many times he had looked at the door, but he still didn't see any signs of it being opened. He walked to Yi Zhao's side worriedly. Clan leader, Yi Zhao shook his head. Everything that happens in the temple cannot be detected. I don't know the current situation either. How could he not want to know what it was like inside? Unfortunately, the ancestor had directly asked him to come out, and he didn't dare to disobey. Elder Yishang's lips moved. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't. Since the clan leader had said so, there was really no other way but to continue waiting. The fact that Shangguan Yu was allowed to enter was already shocking enough, and now she had stayed inside for so long. The longer this dragged on, the more uneasy it was. When Elder Yu returned, he saw that the plaza was strangely quiet. He subconsciously slowed down his footsteps. Clan leader. He already knew about what had happened. He only had time to return after settling the matters at Fenghuang Valley. Yi Zhao glanced at him. Is everything settled over there? Elder Yu smiled and nodded. Other than the few mountains nearby that were more severely damaged and took more time, the other areas are minor problems. After the ancestral worship ceremony, everyone's rest will not be affected. That's good. Only then did Elder Yi Zhao's expression soften slightly. Elder Yu glanced in the direction of the main hall. Seeing that they all had grave expressions, he smiled and said, "That's right. Clan leader, I don't think you need to worry. Shangguan Yu is quite capable, and she has a contract with Dumpling. There shouldn't be any accidents. She will be out soon." Yi Zhao knew that he was comforting him out of goodwill, and nodded. I hope so. In the main hall, Chu Luiyue sat quietly. At this moment, there were many small wounds on her body, and she was stained with blood. She looked very haggard. And in her body, the last spark had landed on her yuan meridian. There was a short silence. Bam! Following this soft sound, the spark slowly formed into the shape of reddish-gold feathers on Chu Luiyue's yuan meridian. Piece by piece, layer by layer. They completely covered her yuan meridian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 16:13. A terrifying pressure was emitted from Chu Luiyue's body. At the same time, the injuries on her body also began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a short while, her skin was as smooth as before. It was as if those injuries had never appeared. A layer of faint reddish gold light enveloped her body, making her look powerful and sacred. Sensing the changes in her body, Dumpling was suddenly stunned. She did not care about crying anymore. She only opened her grape-like eyes wide and stared at Chu Luiyue without blinking. Tears hung on her eyelashes, sparkling and translucent. It made one's heart ache. She and Chu Luiyue had a contract. She could feel Chu Luiyue's pain and could also feel the changes in her body immediately. Her aura seemed to have become stronger. No. To be precise, her yuan meridian had become stronger. That layer of power covered her yuan meridian, as if adding a layer of armor to her yuan meridian. The key was that this power came from the ancestor of the reddish-gold celestial phoenix. Even Dumpling, who had the purest bloodline now, could not be compared to it. Immediately after, Dumpling suddenly felt that the power that was suppressing her suddenly disappeared. Now, do you believe what I said just now? The ancestor's smiling voice sounded. Dumpling was stunned for a while before slowly regaining her senses. A bright smile immediately blossomed on his chubby little face. Ancestor is so good. As she spoke, she could not wait to take a step forward and quickly ran towards Chu Luiyue. Soon, she rushed in front of Chu Luiyue. She finally stopped 3 steps away from Chu Luiyue. Because Chu Luiyue was still meditating and did not open her eyes. Although Dumpling wanted to immediately rush into her arms, she knew that the time was special now. Therefore, she obediently stood in place and waited. She only blinked her big eyes and looked at Chu Luiyue from head to toe. The more she looked, the happier she became. Yu's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Plus, this wasn't just a simple increase in strength. More importantly, it contained a shocking amount of pressure. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. The next moment, she slowly opened her eyes. His eyes were like stars, bright and dazzling. A pure gold flame flashed through her eyes. Chu Luiyue stared fixedly at Dumpling. There seemed to be thousands of stars twinkling in his eyes. She raised her hand. Dumpling's lotus leaf dress suddenly moved without any wind. Chu Luiyue's fair and delicate finger tapped lightly. Something gushed out from her body and quickly gathered in her palm. It was a transparent ball of light the size of a fist. Inside, there was a cluster of golden flames burning. Dumpling's eyes widened slightly. Inside is the heavenly Tao that appeared when she made a contract with Yu. However, wasn't the heavenly energy supposed to be illusory and formless? Why did it suddenly transform into flames? Could it be because of the ancestors' help? Tuanzi was at a loss. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. Dumpling, come here. Her voice was gentle and pleasant, but it carried a hint of pressure that made people submit unconsciously. Dumpling hurriedly took 2 steps forward. Chu Luiyue's palm moved slightly, and the ball of light flew up lightly and floated quietly between the two of them. Then, Chu Luiyue looked up at the mural. Senior, sorry to trouble you. Dumpling was about to turn around when she saw a stream of light flash on the ball of light. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a familiar pattern. It was the totem of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Dumpling blinked. She vaguely felt that her body seemed to have changed a little, but she didn't know why. Then, she saw Chu Luiyue cross her hands in front of her and close her eyes again. The aura around her surged. Suddenly, a silver-red dot of light appeared in front of her. Gradually, more and more light spots appeared, like a sea of stars, and surrounded Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue summoned her own god realm. The atmosphere in the entire hall began to become more and more strange. The surrounding heaven and earth force also gradually surged toward Chu Luiyue. Vaguely, there seemed to be the sound of surging waves. Although Dumpling didn't know what Chu Luiyue was going to do, she could vaguely sense her seriousness. Therefore, she also became nervous. Her two chubby little hands clenched tightly, and she stared at Chu Luiyue without blinking, afraid that she would miss something. At this moment, she suddenly saw a stream of light flash between Chu Luiyue's brows. Then, a second stream of light appeared, and it connected with the first one. After that, a third stream of light appeared. Dumpling opened her mouth in surprise, and her small mouth formed a round O shape. Because she suddenly realized that these streams of light seemed to be forming a pattern. As the number of streams of light between Chu Luiyue's brows increased, the pressure on her body also rapidly increased. Gradually, even Dumpling felt that she was out of breath. The surrounding space seemed to be frozen by this invisible force. She looked at Chu Luiyue with some uncertainty. She wanted to ask, but she was afraid that it would affect her, so she swallowed all those questions in the end. After an unknown period of time, the last stream of light finally landed between Chu Luiyue's brows. In an instant, a brilliant light bloomed, and it was dazzling. An incomparable divine aura suddenly descended upon them. Swoosh! Chu Luiyue opened her eyes. It was clearly a pair of black and bright eyes, but at this moment, it seemed to contain countless stars. It reflected thousands of wheels and revolved. Digression, make up for yesterday, continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1614. Chu Luiyue raised her hand. Her fair palm waved gently, and a stream of light instantly appeared on the light bowl. Soon, a totem exactly the same as the one on her forehead appeared on the transparent ball of light. At this point, the two totems each occupied half of the light ball. Dumpling seemed to be attracted by something as she unconsciously stared at the light bowl. There seemed to be something tugging at the power in her body. Before Dumpling could identify it, she saw the two totems merge into the flames in the light ball. Instantly, the sound of something shattering came from the depths of her mind. Dumpling's eyes widened. The connection between her and Yu was broken. However, just as she panicked and wanted to get up, the light ball suddenly split from the middle. It was as if an invisible knife had cut it evenly from the middle. The cut surface was neat and smooth, and the reddish-gold flames inside were also split into two halves. Then, the two halves flew towards Chu Luiyue and Dumpling respectively. Chu Luiyue raised her hand and caught the half of the light bowl. With a swoosh, the flames quickly burrowed into her palm. Into her body. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue reminded her. Dumpling regained her senses and looked at the half of the light ball that flew in front of her. She hurriedly reached out with both hands to catch it. In the blink of an eye, the flames in the light ball also quickly disappeared into her chubby little hands. You! Dumpling was about to say something when she suddenly froze. Because at this moment, she clearly felt that the subtle connection between them had been re-established. She could once again feel Yu's aura and emotions. Everything happened too quickly, causing Dumpling's mind to be in a daze. Previously, she was nervous and terrified, but now that she had regained what she had lost, she was naturally happy and joyful. In just a few breaths' time, it was already ice and fire. At this moment, the totems between their brows flashed exceptionally brightly and quickly disappeared. Chu Liyue finally let out a heavy sigh when the boiling temperature between his eyebrows had completely disappeared. The huge rock that had been hanging in his heart finally fell at this moment. Finally. Everything went smoothly. Looking at Dumpling in front of him, who was still in a daze, Chu Liyue's heart was filled with tenderness. He smiled and waved at Dumpling. Dumpling, pass, bang. Before he could finish his sentence, Chu Liyue's vision blurred and Dumpling threw herself into his arms. Dumpling's impact was extremely strong. Chu Liyue was caught off guard and both of them fell backwards. Fortunately, at this moment, a gentle force supported Chu Liyue's waist, allowing her to barely stabilize her body. Regiment, woo woo woo. Before Chu Liyue could speak, Dumpling had already burst into tears. Chu Liyue's shoulders were quickly soaked. She immediately felt even more distressed. If one of them dies, as long as the other is still alive, it will preserve the other's life. If there is a chance, it can even bring the other party back to life. The ancestor's voice reverberated throughout the hall. However, Tuanzi was already stunned. A life-binding contract? Although she had never heard of it before, from the ancestor's words, it seemed very powerful. Just now, I forcefully changed your master-servant contract to a contract with the same name. Although there is still a contract between the two of you, it will not be the same as before. From now on, your life and death will no longer depend entirely on Shengguanyu. In this way, Yi Zhao and the rest will not be able to use this contract to do anything to you. The ancestor paused. More importantly, in this way, the two of you will have half an extra life. This was the most important thing. Status, strength, talent, these things all had the most basic prerequisite, being alive. Dumpling covered her mouth in shock, and her eyes widened. So that's how it is. So the moment she lost contact with Yu, it was because the ancestor was helping them. Happiness came too quickly, and Dumpling was still a little dizzy for a moment. She could not help but turn her head and look at Chu Liyue blankly. Then, Yu, why didn't we make this contract directly in the past? Before Chu Liyue could say anything, the ancestor snorted. Naturally, it's because she doesn't know how to. However, this is normal. You have to know that in this world, there are no more than 3 people who can use a life-binding contract. One of them was this. Digression, your February suddenly flashed. I'm really going to sleep. The update during the day is still at 12 o'clock. This is an extra update, not a single update. Moi, *3, epsilon*, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 16:15. Dumpling's eyes widened. So, the ancestor was really that powerful. In that case, not only could she and Yu still be together in the future, but they also didn't have to listen to the elders nagging anymore. Moreover, even if she and Yu encountered any danger again, as long as one of them could escape, then both of them could still survive. This couldn't be better. Chu Liyue also sighed in her heart when she heard that. The life contract was indeed extraordinary. Originally, she didn't know either. However, when the ancestor's power merged into her body and transformed into a feather, covering her yuan meridian with a layer of extremely tough armor, she vaguely sensed something. There seemed to be a chanting sound coming from afar, driving the light ball to split into 2 and fuse together. Although the process was rather difficult, it was worth it. She stood up with Dumpling in her arms and bowed deeply to the crimson gold heavenly phoenix on the mural. I will never forget Senior's great kindness. Dumpling's watery eyes turned, and she hurriedly shouted. Thank you, Ancestor. I knew Ancestor was the best to Dumpling. Although her voice was still a little hoarse, it was soft and cute. The Ancestor snorted. Now you have a sweet mouth. You're not angry anymore. You're not making a fuss anymore. Dumpling's little face blushed, and a big smile bloomed on her face. Ancestor is magnanimous and magnanimous. Why would you bicker with a child like me? Besides, you dote on me the most, don't you? Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to summon the Ancestor's soul, and she wouldn't have been able to become the young master and enter this place, right? The Ancestor couldn't help but laugh. You know how to talk. I wonder who you learned it from. There was no anger in his voice, only affection. Of course, he doted on Dumpling. Otherwise, he wouldn't be willing to spend so much effort to help her change the contract. Shangguan Yu. I still have a few words to say to you. Chu Liuyue's expression was firm. Senior, please speak your mind. The hall fell into silence. After a long while, the Ancestor said, Dumpling is the young mistress of our clan and the future successor of the clan leader. Now that she's still young, I'll have to trouble you to take care of her in many areas. The corners of Chu Liuyue's lips curved up slightly. Senior, you're being too polite. Even if the other party did not say these things, she would never let Dumpling suffer any grievances. You're willing to go to my clan alone for Dumpling. Of course, I can trust you. The voice hesitated for a moment. If you go and look for the remaining ones, I'm afraid, it will be very dangerous. Today, I will change the contract between the two of you. This is the last thing I can do to help you. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat, then he nodded solemnly. Junior understands Senior's intentions. The voice laughed and sighed softly. That thing's willingness to recognize you as its master has already proven a lot. You guys go ahead. I'm a little tired and want to rest. Towards the end, his voice was indeed tinged with a bit of exhaustion and gradually became softer. Chu Liyue pursed her lips and put Dumpling down. She bowed respectfully. Senior, take care. Dumpling also bowed and said in a crisp voice. Goodbye, Ancestor. Dumpling will miss Ancestor every day. A low and distant chuckle could be heard, and then it gradually disappeared. After a while, Chu Liyue held Dumpling's hand. Dumpling, let's go. Creak, the door of the Phoenix Shrine finally opened. Everyone who was waiting outside the main hall was invigorated when they heard the sound. They looked in the direction of the door. As the heavy and solemn door slowly opened, two figures, one tall and one short, appeared in front of everyone. They were Shangguan Yu and Dumpling, who had been in there for a few days. They're finally out. This thought flashed through countless people's minds. Yi Zhao took the lead and walked forward. His gaze fell on Dumpling first. Seeing Dumpling's red eyes and the tear stains on her fair and tender little round face, Yi Zhao's heart clenched. Dumpling, what's wrong with you? Why was she crying when worshipping the ancestors? He almost immediately frowned and looked at Chu Liyue. Sensing his strict and scrutinizing gaze, Chu Liyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She and Dumpling came out directly after bidding farewell to the ancestors. Dumpling had just finished crying and looked extremely pitiful. It was no wonder that Yi Zhao would suspect her when he saw her. Clan leader, I'm fine. Dumpling held Chu Liyue's hand tightly. Knowing that the clan leader had misunderstood, she hurriedly explained. Yi Zhao, on the other hand, was still skeptical. Dumpling, this is the Phoenix Shrine, and you're the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If you're really bullied, you must tell us, okay? I'm really fine. Dumpling mumbled. It's just that I finally got to talk to the ancestors, and I'm so happy that I cried. Before coming out, she had already discussed with Yu that they wouldn't tell anyone about the change in the contract for the time being. If Yi Zhao and the others knew about this now, they definitely wouldn't have any scruples about Chu Luyue anymore. They might even ask Dumpling to stay in the Phoenix God Mountain. After signing the life contract, humans and magical beasts no longer had to stay together all the time. Magical beasts also didn't have to worry about dying because of humans. Yi Zhao and the others had always wanted Dumpling to stay. If they knew about this, there was no doubt that their reason would be even more valid. In any case, they had already promised not to get involved until Dumpling became an adult. It might be more appropriate to say it later. Yi Zhao carefully sized up Dumpling again. After confirming that she was really not injured, he finally relaxed. Then, he said to Chu Luyue, "Miss Shangguan, if we offended you just now, please forgive us. Dumpling is our clan's young master after all, so we will naturally take care of her." Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows slightly. How rare. Clan leader Yi Zhao was actually so polite to her. Could it be because she had made a trip to the Phoenix Shrine? Clan leader Yi Zhao, you're overthinking. I know that you're all doing this for Dumpling's sake. Chu Luyue's principle had always been, if you respect me, I'll respect you tenfold. After all, Yi Zhao was the honorable clan leader of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. She was already very gratified that he could speak to her so calmly. In any case, it was much better than the beginning. Seeing Chu Luyue smile, Yi Zhao's impression of her improved a little. It seemed like she really didn't take these things to heart. Although Shangguan Yu looked young, she knew her limits. She knew when to fight and when to give in. No wonder she was so famous among the humans. Yi Zhao paused for a moment before asking, "Did everything go smoothly during the ancestral worship?" As soon as he said this, everyone pricked up their ears. This was actually what they wanted to know the most. It was normal for Dumpling to worship her ancestors. The key was, what did Shangguan Yu do when she went in? What the hell is going on inside? Amidst the silence, Chu Luyue smiled brightly. Of course. Senior is very nice. I feel very close to you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 16:16. The huge square suddenly became even quieter. At this moment, even the wind seemed to have stopped flowing. Everyone's expression suddenly became extraordinarily interesting. What did Shangguan Yu just say? The ancestor was very kind and was very kind to her. Did that mean that she had really met the ancestor? And from the sound of it, the ancestor seemed to be very kind to her. She was a human after all. After a short period of dead silence, the square was finally in an uproar. This, she really met the ancestor. I've attended the ancestral worship hall twice, but I haven't seen him. I'm jealous. I've attended it 5 times, but I haven't seen him either, right? Other than the clan leader and elders, everyone else has been treated the same no matter how many times they've been here. If you want to talk to the ancestor, you'll have to become an elder first. Oh, right, the young lord can do it too. The prerequisite is that you have to have the ability to do so. Obviously, no one present had the ability to do so. After all, the position of the young lord already belonged to the little person standing above. Damn it. The position of the young lord has been empty for hundreds of years. Just when it was about to be chosen, it was snatched away by a little girl who broke through halfway. She has the purest bloodline, so I won't say anything. There's no point in being envious. It's only right that she can go in to worship the ancestor. But who can tell me what's going on with Shangguan Yu? She's Dumpling's contractor. Even if it's for Dumpling's sake, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? What was the ancestor thinking? Yi Zhao and the others, who had seen the world, had very interesting expressions at this time. The remnant consciousness of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestor was usually in a deep sleep. It would only wake up during the ancestral worship ceremony. And the only people who could talk to it were the newly elected young lord or the clan leader. Even the 5 elders could only follow along to meet it at most. They never had the honor of being taught by the ancestor. But now, even a human was doing better than them. Although it was unbelievable, Yi Zhao and the others didn't think that Chu Luiyue was lying. There was no need to lie about such matters, because it could be easily verified or refuted. This meant that the ancestor really treated her well. I wonder if Miss Shangwan can reveal a thing or two to me. Did the ancestor have any instructions? Yi Zhao took a deep breath and asked politely. Chu Luiyue smiled. It's nothing much. What the ancestor meant was that Dumpling is still young, and he asked me to take care of her. She had said this sentence so casually, but in everyone's ears, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Wasn't it obvious that he was going to let her take care of Dumpling? Since even the ancestors had said so, then what right did the others have to object? Above the vast and boundless sea, the frozen ice reflected a faint glow. Shangguan Jing stood on the shore and looked into the distance. Seeing that the scene had not changed at all compared to before, he couldn't help but sigh. Another day had passed. Yu hadn't returned yet. It had already been more than a month. He didn't know what the situation inside was like. Recalling the letter from before, Shangguan Jing frowned slightly. The fact that Yu was able to ask the elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan to help send the news out was actually beyond his expectations. It was also because of this that he could continue to be patient and wait until now. However, Yu clearly said that she would be back soon. However, a long time had passed, and he still didn't see her figure. Crack. In the distance, a crisp cracking sound suddenly sounded, interrupting Shangguan Jing's thoughts. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw that the frozen layer of ice on the vast sea seemed to have suddenly cracked open. His heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and looked intently. Soon, accompanied by a series of crackling sounds, the ice layer instantly seemed to be covered with spider webs. Under Shangguan Jing's nervous gaze, finally, bang! All the ice layers completely shattered. At the same time, the pattern formed by the golden flames in the sky also began to gradually fade. Taizu. A familiar clear voice sounded. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 16-17. Shangguan Jing suddenly looked up. A slender and exquisite figure suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Her figure was light as she walked over on the waves. The shattered floating ice reflected brilliant light and landed around her, as if she was enveloped in a layer of holy light. She was powerful and noble, almost making one unable to look straight at her. Shangguan Jing was surprised and delighted. However, he saw a small figure following beside Chu Luiyue. It was a girl who looked to be no more than 3 or 4 years old. Her eyes were exquisite and cute. Her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string. They chased after golden bells and swayed with the wind, jingling. The wind blew over and swept up her shiny pure gold lotus leaf dress. It swayed and was very moving. Shangguan Jing was a little confused. This is beautiful and cute, but why did you bring a child with her when she made a trip there? Just as he was filled with doubts, Chu Luiyue had already pulled Dumpling over the waves and landed a few steps in front of Shangguan Jing. Only then did Shangguan Jing come back to his senses and hurriedly go forward. How are you? Why did you go for so long? Are you injured? Were you bullied over there? Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the series of questions. Taizu, which one do you want me to talk about first? Only then did Sheng Wanjing realize that he had lost his composure and hurriedly coughed. Tell me slowly, tell me slowly. Chu Luiyue knew that he was like this because he was too nervous about her. Her heart warmed as she said with a smile, don't worry, I'm not injured. Aren't I standing here perfectly fine? Besides, I didn't suffer any grievances inside. They were quite polite to me. Of course, that was after she threatened them with death. However, there was no need to tell Taizu about this in detail. In short, most of the time in Phoenix Mountain, the other party's attitude towards her was still all right. Sheng Wanjing didn't quite believe it. He grabbed her wrist and looked her up and down carefully. After confirming that she was really fine, he finally believed her. But at the same time, this made him even more confused. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's letter was very impolite. It was clear that it was aimed at you, If she went, would they really not bully her? Chu Luiyue smiled. Taizu, don't worry. All the troubles and problems have been smoothly resolved. From now on, you don't have to worry anymore. Really? Sheng Wanjing found it unbelievable, but looking at Chu Luiyue's appearance, it did not seem like he was lying. What exactly happened in the past month? He was momentarily at a loss for words, not knowing where to begin. He turned his gaze and saw the little girl by the side. At this moment, the little girl was tightly holding onto one of Chu Luiyue's hands. She looked up at him with her round, white, and tender little face and her big, grape-like eyes. Sheng Wanjing's heart jumped. Why does this feel so familiar? Dumpling, greet him. Chu Luiyue touched Dumpling's head and said gently. Dumpling obediently took a step forward. A big smile bloomed on her face as she called out crisply. Hello, Grandpa Taizu. Sheng Wanjing was instantly shocked and looked at Chu Luiyue with his mouth agape. This is, Dumpling. Isn't this the name of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix that you contracted? You guessed right. Dumpling has transformed into a human. Chu Luiyue explained with a smile. Moreover, she is now the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Sheng Wanjing sucked in a cold breath. What exactly did this girl do when she went to the Phoenix God Mountain? Digression, continue at 6:00 mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 16-18. After that, Chu Luiyue briefly told Taizu about what had happened in Phoenix God Mountain during this period of time. She didn't mention some of the details, including the change in the contract with Dumpling. Chu Luiyue had tried her best to keep a low profile, but what she said still shocked Sheng Wanjing on the spot, and he couldn't recover for a long time. Dumpling was the purest bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. You helped Dumpling open her fourth meridian? Dumpling was appointed as the young master at the ancestral worship ceremony. Even the arrogant clan leader, Yi Zhao, promised that Dumpling would live with you, in the future and maintain the contract until she became an adult. Then, she would make the choice herself. Each and every one of them was news that could shock the entire world if they were to be brought out. Now, all of this had happened to one person. Their ancestral worship ceremony has ended, so I brought Dumpling back. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she saw Taizu's stunned expression. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and wave it in front of Taizu. Taizu. Sheng Wanjing's eyes focused. He looked at her and then at Dumpling. No, nothing. I just felt a little surprised. Then, he closed his eyes and pinched the space between his eyebrows. Chu Luiyue looked at Taizu with understanding. It was no wonder Taizu had such a reaction. For the past month, he had probably been imagining how she was bullied and suppressed in his mind every day. In the end, she only realized that her previous thoughts were completely wrong after she came out. It was normal for him to have a huge psychological impact. After a while, Taizu finally recovered. He opened his eyes and looked at Dumpling with a complicated gaze. "So, you brought the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan with you just like that?" Dumpling pulled Chu Liuyue's hand and looked at her uneasily. Could it be that Taizu found it too troublesome to bring her along? That's right, a lot of things had happened in the Phoenix God Mountain. If it wasn't for her, you wouldn't have had to go through all that. Chu Liyue couldn't help but chuckle and poke her little head. How could the Taizu be unhappy? They were clearly in disbelief. Forming a contract with a Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix was already extremely rare, not to mention that she was a young master with a special identity. That's right. Dumpling had been with me for so many years. Although she had become the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she was still a child. Patriarch Yi Zhao and the others also felt that it would be better for Dumpling to follow me. Shengguan Jing's expression was strange. They are willing to. Chu Liyue blinked. She didn't know about other people, but clan leader Yi Zhao couldn't bear to part with her. But so what? Clan leader Yi Zhao dotes on Dumpling very much, and it's precisely because of this that he's willing to respect Dumpling's choice. Of course, he also said that he hopes that if I have time, I can bring Dumpling back to visit more often. Shengguan Jing could understand every word, but when they were put together, he was a little confused. Did Yi Zhao really say this himself? He had always been extremely proud and disdained the human race. When Shengguan Jing was waiting here, he had suspected more than once that Yi Zhao might even directly attack you. In the end, why was the development of the matter completely different from what he had imagined? But now, the person was standing in front of him, so he had no choice but to believe it. That's pretty good. Shengguan Jing coughed and looked over Chu Liuyue's shoulder at the sea behind her. The broken pieces of floating ice were rapidly melting. As the waves surged, scattered flames could be vaguely seen burning quietly. It was as if everything was starting to return to normal. For an instant, he even felt that the past month or so was like a dream. Chu Liyue followed his gaze, half-turned, and looked into the distance. There was no trace of the divine Phoenix Mountain here. That oppressive might had also gradually dissipated. However, compared to when they had first arrived, their mental states had undergone an enormous change. Chu Liyue smiled. Taizu, suddenly, her voice paused, as if she had sensed something, and she looked back. It was evening now, and the sun was gradually sinking below the sea level. A familiar fluctuation came from the sky that was dyed with a layer of warm gold. What's wrong? Sensing her expression, the great ancestor felt a little strange and turned back to take a look. Above the void, there were suddenly waves gradually rising. Then, a tall and slender figure stepped out of it. It was a young man dressed in snow-white clothes, with golden cloud patterns embroidered on his sleeves and hem. Under the last ray of afterglow, he flickered with a faint glow. His appearance was enchanting, and the aura around him was indescribably noble. Just by standing there, he seemed to have the disdain and nobility to look down on all living things. It was Rongxiu. A question flashed through Shengguan Jing's mind: why is he here? The divine Phoenix Mountain was extremely hidden, and even they found it under the guidance of Dumpling. Why did Rongxiu appear directly? As he thought about it, Rongxiu's figure moved, and he headed over. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of them. His eyes fell on Chu Liyue first. The two of them met eyes. This moment was more than 1,000 words. Then, he bowed to Shengguan Jing first. Greetings, Senior Shengguan. Shengguan Jing helped him up, and then asked, Rongxiu, why are you here all of a sudden? Rongxiu's thin scarlet lips curved slightly, and the surrounding scenery instantly faded. I'm here to take you and you back to the Yuntian Tower. Shengwan Jing paused. No, I mean. Have you been here before? No. Rongxiu was very quick-witted. How could he not guess Shengwan Jing's doubts? He explained, I can come here because of the interspatial ring on you's finger. Shengwan Jing suddenly understood. Yes. That was the most precious treasure of the Yuntian Tower. As the Holy Sun, Rongxiu could naturally sense the aura on it and find this place. Thinking about it, there were indeed several times before when you was in danger, Rongxiu could always appear in time. It was just that this place had changed to the divine Phoenix Mountain. How's the situation of Patriarch Bailey Jun? Chu Luiyue stepped forward and asked. Rongxiu's smile deepened. Don't worry, it's basically solved. It's just that it will take some time for Patriarch to wake up. Chu Luiyue finally felt relieved, but then she was a little surprised. We're not going back to the academy. Master and the others should still be waiting. As if he knew what she was thinking, Rongxiu nodded gently. I've already sent a message to the academy, telling them that I will personally come to take you back to the Yuntian Tower. Chu Luiyue was stunned. There was nothing wrong with going back to the Yuntian Tower, but why are you in such a hurry all of a sudden? Rongxiu paused, and there seemed to be flowing light in his deep phoenix eyes. Because I've been waiting for too long. Digression, I have to deal with some matters. I'll be off at 6:30 p.m. You can get a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 16-19. His words were clear and light, but they were like the wind blowing over a pool of spring water. Chu Luiyue looked into his deep eyes and suddenly realized something. Her heart beat fast. It's been too long since we got engaged. Rongxiu looked at her attentively and gently. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to be hit hard by something. She couldn't describe the sweetness in her heart. Thinking about it carefully, she had indeed kept him waiting for too long. In the middle of these years, she didn't even have the chance to ask what he had been through after she left and before they reunited. Rongxiu looked into her eyes and said in a low voice, I don't want to wait anymore. Bang! Before Rongxiu finished his words, a strange sound suddenly came. Chu Luiyue frowned and looked at the interspatial ring in her hand. The sound of a collision just now came from it. Chu Luiyue thought of something. A black wooden tablet suddenly appeared in front of them. It was the seabuckthorn wooden tablet of the Black Demon Cave that Chu Luiyue had taken from Fangzhou City. Rongxiu's eyes suddenly turned cold. The totem on the black wooden tablet suddenly seemed to come alive. Every line was twisting strangely, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts just by looking at it. Then, the lines scattered and condensed into a line of dark red words that looked like bloodstains. If you want to save Chu Ning, I'll see you in the God-slaying tomb in 10 days. Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. The line of words quickly dissipated and condensed into the totem again. The pressure on it also disappeared quickly. With a clang, it fell to the ground. Shengwan Jing stood aside and didn't see the words on it clearly. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and gave off a shocking coldness. Shengwan Jing was a little worried. How are you? What did she see just now? Why did she have such a big reaction? I'll go with you. At this moment, Rongxiu suddenly spoke. He raised his finger slightly, and the black wooden tablet flew into his hand. He looked down and then handed it to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue looked up at him. Rongxiu, she knew what he was talking about when he didn't finish his sentence. Although they didn't even have a chance to talk properly after she regained her memory. But she knew what Rongxiu was thinking. She also wanted to go back with him and fulfill the promise from a few years ago. But at this moment, it's not the first time they've done something like this. Rong Xiao chuckled. Whether it was for her or for him, those people had never given up. But this time, they chose the right time. Rong Xiao's tone was nonchalant, and only the cold and harsh look in his eyes showed his current mood. Actually, this is good. Lord Chu Ning is in danger. You can't be at ease. Rong Xiao held her hand. We haven't had the time to inform Tianling. I think it's a little rushed. Chapter 1620. Since they came out of Phoenix God Mountain, where else could they have gone? Mao Yang was confused. Although Sheng Wanyu was Sheng Wanjing's descendant, Sheng Wanjing had fought alone in the Divine Ruins world back then and did not establish his own force. The place that Sheng Wanjing was most familiar with was probably the northern region of the primordial world. However, it was obviously impossible for them to go there now. Rong Xiao and Sheng Wanjing were extremely vigilant. Our people didn't dare to get too close, and then we lost them. The subordinate wiped the sweat on his forehead and said carefully. It's all because of our incompetence. Please punish us, clan leader. Mao Yang shook his head. If we lost them, just let them retreat first. When it's a little later, we'll go out and ask around to see where they went. In addition, the most important thing was to find out what had happened to Sheng Wanyu in the Phoenix God Mountain for more than a month. According to his understanding of Yi Zhao, it was unlikely that he would let a human who had contracted with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan leave safely. Moreover, they had held the ancestral worship ceremony in the middle. At such a critical moment, Sheng Wanyu could still escape unscathed. He couldn't help but suspect that there was something fishy going on. Also, find out who that little girl is. Mao Yang frowned. When Sheng Wanyu entered, he was clearly alone. Even Sheng Wanjing was rejected at the door. Why did a 3- or 4-year-old girl suddenly appear beside him when he came out? That little girl was obviously not human. It was very likely that she was a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. However, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was the same as them. There were no children in the clan. Those who could transform into human form were at least in their teens. This little girl's appearance was really strange. Yes. The subordinate hurriedly responded respectfully and was about to leave with a bow. Just as he took 2 steps, he was stopped by Mao Yang again. Remember, when you do these things, you must be low-key and cautious. The 1000 summit is imminent, no accidents are allowed. The subordinate's expression became even more nervous. Yes. Lingxiao College. In the main hall of the Grand Orient Bell Tower, Dean Nan Su Huai and several elders were gathered together. The 10,000 Wine Mountain has basically been cleaned up, but it will take a long time for it to be completely repaired. The few mountains that had been affected could now be opened again. Elder Hua Feng sat below and leaned lazily against the back of the chair. He let out a long sigh of relief. Only the heavens knew that during this period of time, they had been so busy dealing with the aftermath that they didn't even have time to catch their breaths. Fortunately, he had finally completed the bulk of the task, and the rest could be taken care of slowly. It's just that Rong Xiao wanted to bring them back to Yuntian Tower, but Yu received news about her father, Chu Ning. Now, they are on their way to the Godslayer tomb. The Godslayer tomb. The expressions of the several elders were all shocked. That place was extremely dangerous, and they were going there just like that. No wonder the dean looked so serious. Just the few of them. Nan Su Huai nodded. That was what he was worried about. The Godslayer tomb was vast, and there were dangers everywhere. What's more, it was the enemy who invited them. It was obvious that the enemy had set up an inescapable trap and was just waiting for them to make their move. But Chu Ning was Yu He's father, and they had to go. Nan Su-hui thought for a moment and stood up. Bo Yen, I'll leave the school's matters to you for the time being. I'll go to the Godslayer tomb personally. The elders were shocked, and they all said that they wanted to go with him. But they were all rejected by Nan Su-hui. I can't leave the school alone. You all should stay. I've been to the Godslayer tomb before, and it's more convenient to go alone. After saying that, without waiting for anyone to refute, his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. At the same time, on one of the peaks of Lingshao College, Yi Wenzhua suddenly opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the Donghuang Clock Tower. He left at this time. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1621. Lingshao College had just gone through a calamity, so there was no reason for Nan Su-hui to leave at this time. Something must have happened. However, he didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Yi Wenzhua narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment before he got up and headed to the side hall. Jiu Qing. Yi Wenzhua pushed the door open and entered. Upon hearing the voice, Jun Jiuqing, who was reading something, immediately put down the things in his hands and stood up. Master. Yi Wenzhua's eyes quickly swept across the table, and he immediately frowned. Reading the letter from Beiming Dynasty again. Jun Jiuqing nodded. Father said, now that you're in the Divine Ruins world, you should focus more on this side. Yi Wenzhua interrupted him. There's no need to pay too much attention to Beiming Dynasty. Don't forget which family's blood flows in your veins. When he said the last half of his sentence, Yi Wenzhua's eyes were staring straight at Jun Jiuqing, carrying an indescribable pressure. Jun Jiuqing paused for a moment and the corner of his lips seemed to twitch. You're right, Master. Jiuqing will follow your teaching seriously in the future. Yi Wenzhua nodded in satisfaction. It wasn't easy for him to raise Jun Jiuqing, so he didn't want him to waste his time and energy on unimportant things. Yi Wenzhua pressed one hand on the table and tapped it with his fingers. Nan Su-hui left the school just now. A look of surprise appeared in Jun Jiuqing's eyes. At this time, I don't know what he's doing. However, I can probably guess a little. Yi Wenzhua sneered. The fact that he left Lingshao College at this time means that the matter is more important to him. It's very likely that it has something to do with Shanghai Yu. A dark light flashed in Jun Jiuqing's eyes and disappeared in an instant. She should still be at Phoenix God Mountain. If the dean goes now, it means that she must have left Phoenix God Mountain. Yi Wenzhua suddenly stopped what he was doing as countless guesses flashed through his mind. Did something happen to the Shanghuan Yu? Yi Wenzhua muttered. Jun Jiuqing lowered his eyes and asked after a moment. Now that the dean has left, what does Master plan to do next? Yi Wenzhua's heart was filled with anxiety. This time, Nan Su-hui finally came back, but before they could confront him, he ran away again. After pondering for a moment, his expression finally settled. I'll go after him. You just wait at the academy. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly, adding a touch of wickedness to his already coquettish appearance. This. Are you sure? No one knew where the dean was going or what he was going to do. If you follow me so rashly. It was precisely because of this that they had to follow him and control his whereabouts. Yi Wenzhua raised his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say any more. You just have to stay here and take care of the matters in the academy. As for the rest, Master will take care of it. Jun Jiuqing lowered his head. Yes, I will follow Master's orders. Yi Wenzhua's figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. The room became quiet and empty again. Jun Jiuqing raised his head, the expression on his face was much calmer. He lowered his eyes and glanced at the letter on the table, then sat down again. After he was done, he slowly put the letter away. Then, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. After a while, his eyelashes fluttered slightly, and he opened his eyes again. But at this time, his eyes were filled with a biting cold murderous intent. Annihilated again. What are you doing? Digression. The famished February tossed out a small piece of supper and turned over to sleep. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1622. Send another one. Jun Juqing shouted in a deep voice. The room fell silent again. After a moment, Jun Juqing's gaze swept across the letter on the table. He immediately took it in his hand and got up to walk out. Before he reached the door, the void in front of him rippled. In the next second, he raised his hand and waved. A black spatial crack appeared. His expression was cold as he stepped into it. The wind lifted the corner of his clothes, and he disappeared in an instant. Phoenix God Mountain was very far away from the God-slaying mound. There was no teleportation formation between the two places. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue and the rest were not weak. If they traveled at full speed, they would not be too slow. In addition, Shengguan Jing had been to the God-slaying mound before, so they avoided many detours along the way. After traveling for a day and a night, they came to an undulating mountain range. Finally, they decided to rest for a while. Night fell, and the full moon hung high in the sky. The mountain peaks formed winding and surging lines in the dark night. They found a flatter place to rest at the foot of a mountain. The bonfire danced, elongating their shadows. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. She was concentrating on absorbing the force of heaven and earth. Although she was already a high god, after traveling at full speed for a day and a night, she had used up a lot of her energy. She needed to rest. Dumpling was lying beside her. She had fallen into a deep sleep. Chu Luiyue wanted to let Dumpling return to her body. It would be more convenient that way. However, Dumpling had just transformed into a human. She was curious about everything in the outside world. Chu Luiyue let her be. Hence, her small body could not support her weight. She fell asleep as soon as she landed. In comparison, Rong Xiao and Shengguan Jing were in a much better situation. The two of them agreed that Shengguan Jing would guard the first half of the night, and Rong Xiao would guard the second half. However, Rong Xiao did not go to rest. Instead, he took out a fist-sized round stone and polished it. The stone was black. Under the light of the bonfire, it did not have any luster. It seemed to have swallowed all the light around it. However, it vaguely gave off a sharp and cold aura. As Rong Xiao polished it more and more, the black layer on the stone faded away. A golden light was faintly discernible. Shengguan Jing did not care about it. He knew that Rong Xiao was also a weapon refiner. And he was talented and powerful. It was normal for him to polish a stone. However, when the stone emitted a trace of golden light, it finally attracted Shengguan Jing's attention. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the stone for a while before he asked with uncertainty, "What's the matter?" "This is black gold spirit stone." Rong Xiao didn't stop and lightly nodded. "Senior Shengguan has good eyes." Shengguan Jing exclaimed to himself. He was a weapon refiner venerable. Naturally, he knew how precious the black gold spirit stone was. It was extremely hard and could naturally nurture force. Divine weapons forged with the black gold spirit stone were of high levels. The level of a divine weapon was not only determined by the weapon refiner's standard. It was also closely related to the quality of the materials used. Some things could only be forged into high-grade divine weapons at best. This was because the Tianlei power of a king divine weapon was not something it could withstand. Meanwhile, some of them had great potential, and could even be used as emperor artifacts or martial highness artifacts. The reason why the black gold spirit stone was so precious was that it could withstand the Tianlei power of a venerable divine weapon. In other words, the success rate of using it to forge a venerable divine weapon was higher. Therefore, it was very famous among weapon refiners. However, the production of the black gold spirit stone was very low. It was also very difficult to find. Therefore, it was considered a treasure among treasures. Even a famous weapon refiner venerable like Shangguan Jing had only heard of it in rumors. He had never seen it before. The Yuntian Tower was indeed rich. They could even take out such a thing. Shangguan Jing decided to watch the Rongxiu forge. The more he watched, the more surprised he was. This was because he realized that the Rongxiu's talent and strength in weapon refinement had actually exceeded his previous expectations. Judging from the way the Rongxiu polished the black gold spirit stone, he was skilled and nimble. He could even be considered to be a master. Even compared to Shangguan Jing, he wasn't much weaker. Shangguan Jing touched his chin. He raised his eyelids slightly and glanced at the Rongxiu. The young man's handsome and devilish face was as clear as jade under the illumination of the fire. He was incomparably noble. Speaking of which, he only knew that the Rongxiu was the number 1 in Lingxiao College's weapon refinement ranking. However, he had never seen the Rongxiu forge with his own eyes. Now that he saw it, it was indeed quite amazing. Polishing the black gold spirit stone seemed simple, but the requirements were extremely strict. To be able to reach the level of the Rongxiu, experience alone was definitely not enough. More importantly, one had to rely on talent. Shangguan Jing had always been very proud in this aspect. However, when he saw the Rongxiu's actions, he vaguely felt that the Rongxiu's talent seemed to be slightly better than his. At the very least, when he was at the same age as the Rongxiu, he definitely could not do this. Shangguan Jing rarely admired anyone in terms of weapon refinement. Otherwise, he would not have been able to establish the record of defeating several weapon refinement venerables without being defeated. However, when he looked at the Rongxiu at this moment, he praised from the bottom of his heart. He was indeed a rare weapon refinement genius. However, the strange thing was that in the world of God's ruins, most of the rumors about the Rongxiu said that he was decisive and ruthless. In Lingxiao College, the fact that he occupied the top of the Azure Cloud Roll of Honor made everyone know that he was extremely talented and had extremely strong combat strength. However, it did not seem to be too exaggerated. Logically speaking, with the talent that the Rongxiu actually possessed, his reputation as a weapon refinement master was definitely much greater than now. However, it seemed that no one had specially mentioned it before. Shangguan Jing frowned. Could it be that the Rongxiu was deliberately hiding it? Clang. A crisp sound of collision suddenly sounded, interrupting Shangguan Jing's thoughts. He looked over and saw that the Rongxiu had already finished polishing the black gold spirit stone. The originally pitch-black round stone now shone with a golden light. The layer of black on the surface had been completely polished, revealing a layer of gold. It was clear and lustrous, but it looked extremely tough. Upon closer inspection, one could vaguely see a black pattern on the surface. Those lines flowed and changed into some kind of pattern from time to time, with an indescribable strange beauty. The Rongxiu took out a sharp silver carving knife and began to carve on it. Shangguan Jing could not help but ask. Rongxiu, what kind of yuan instrument are you going to forge? The Rongxiu paused, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. The pure gold armor that you wore previously shattered, so I thought of forging a better one for her. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1623. Shangguan Jing was dumbfounded. Armor. Armor. How many black gold spirit stones will be consumed? Rongxiu paused and said, "This is not a problem. It's just that it might take some time." It would be best if it could be completed before entering the god-slaying tomb. Shengguan was so shocked that he couldn't speak. This not a question. Such a small piece was a rare treasure that was hard to come by in the world. He originally thought that Rongxiu was going to forge it into a short sword or something else, but he never expected that he was actually going to forge a set of armor for you. Some time ago, when Chu Luiyue went through the disaster in the Wine Mountain, the pure gold sacred armor on her body was indeed completely destroyed. Shengguan had also thought about this problem, but unfortunately, he never had the chance. When he was waiting outside the Phoenix God Mountain, he was full of worry and couldn't calm down to forge weapons. He didn't expect that Rongxiu would be one step ahead of him. And it was with this extremely precious black gold spirit stone. Shengguan suddenly felt that the little stock in his hands was really not worth it. Compared with the black gold spirit stone in Rongxiu's hands, it was really inferior. Shengguan calmed himself down. Anyway, it was for you, It was a good thing. A good thing. Thank you for your trouble. Shengguan coughed. But isn't it a little too late? Their schedule was originally very rushed, and Rongxiu had even less time to forge weapons. And if he wanted to use this black gold spirit stone to forge a perfect set of armor, it would have to be a king divine weapon. At that time, it would be unavoidable for him to go through a lot of trouble. To complete it before entering the god-slaying tomb was indeed too difficult. Rongxiu's lips curled up slightly, and he smiled faintly. I'll try my best. Shengguan opened his mouth and glanced at the black gold spirit stone that was shining with golden light. In the end, he nodded. He wanted to offer his help, but then he remembered that Rongxiu had already finished polishing it. It would be inappropriate for him to intervene now. He could only hope that Rongxiu's refining would go smoothly. Rongxiu lowered his head and continued what he was doing. His expression was very focused. His bony hand was holding a carving knife, and he was carving the stone stroke by stroke. Without making a sound, the black gold spirit stone had already changed its appearance. As Shengguan watched from the side, a thought suddenly popped into his mind. Why does Rongxiu look so familiar? It was as if he had seen it somewhere before. However, this thought only lingered in Shengguan mind for a moment before he quickly suppressed it. Perhaps he was thinking too much. The night passed quickly. When the first ray of sunlight shone down, Rongxiu stopped what he was doing. He raised his gaze slightly, glanced at Chu Luiyue, and put away the item in his hand. At this moment, Chu Luiyue finally opened her eyes and slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. After a night of rest, her physical and mental strength had basically recovered. The fatigue on her body was swept away, and even her eyes were brighter. She stretched lazily, and a few crackling sounds came from her body. Dumpling, who was beside her, heard the noise and also turned over. She rubbed her eyes and subconsciously leaned toward Chu Luiyue. "Ah, you," she mumbled, as if she was still half asleep. She opened her arms and was about to hug Chu Luiyue's neck. However, just as she was about to pounce into Chu Luiyue's arms, she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. Dumpling's body stiffened. She subconsciously turned her neck and looked to the side. The Honorable Saint was smiling warmly like a spring breeze. Dumpling suddenly woke up. She abruptly stopped in her tracks and quickly retracted her small arm. Chu Luiyue was waiting to hug her when she suddenly saw Dumpling stop and retract her arms. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue was a little puzzled. There was something wrong with this child. "Ah, you, Dumpling is so tired. Dumpling, can you go back today?" Dumpling shouted a string of words like a cannon. Chu Luiyue was stunned. "Of course. You." Before she finished speaking, Dumpling's figure had already flashed and disappeared on the spot. The next moment, she returned to Chu Liuyue's body. Phew, Dumpling let out a long breath. That was close. Chu Liyue was speechless. Why is she in such a hurry? Is she tired out from yesterday? Are you feeling better? Rongxiu walked up and asked gently. Chu Liyue looked up and nodded with a smile. She didn't know if it was because Taizu and Rongxiu were both here, but she had a good night's rest. That's good. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Let's continue. Shengguan Jing buried the bonfire and raised his voice. Chu Liyue nodded. The group continued on their way, heading toward the god-slaying mound. Red Moon Desert. The scorching sun hung in the sky, and heat waves were rolling. At first glance, it seemed that even the air was distorted. Only the lake in the middle of the desert had a hint of coolness. A gentle breeze blew, causing circles of ripples. A figure suddenly appeared beside the lake. Purple hair, purple eyes, and a long robe. It was Dugu Maobao. He stood by the lake and glanced at the sky. After sensing that there were no changes, he retracted his gaze. Looking at the calm lake, he narrowed his eyes and waved his sleeves. The water in the lake automatically parted to two sides. Dugu Maobao's figure flashed and quickly disappeared under the lake. Not long after, the surface of the lake returned to its usual tranquil state, as if nothing had happened. Dugu Maobao walked to the dungeon under the lake. In the dim and cramped space, there was still a faint smell of blood. A few black chains wrapped around two figures. They were Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao. When the two saw Dugu Maobao's figure suddenly appear, they were delighted. Diwu Zhangze smiled. Big Bao, you're back. But soon, his smile froze on his face. You're injured. Dugu Maobao's expression was indifferent. Just a small injury. Lan Xiao stared at him for a while and suddenly sneered. TSK. Big Bao, do you really think that you can hide some things from us just because you've reconstructed your divine body? Dugu Maobao was about to speak when blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His body suddenly fell backward. Bang! He fell heavily to the ground. Big Bao! Diwu Zhangze exclaimed. Lan Zhao's expression also changed. The chains clanked as they were dragged by the two of them. Fortunately, Dugu Maobao didn't faint and stood up. I'm fine, you call this fine. Diwu Zhangze's tone, which was always gentle, also became stern. Dugu Maobao wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His face was much paler than before. He closed his eyes and said word by word, that person is about to wake up. The surroundings suddenly became silent. Digression, 6:00 in the afternoon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1624. As expected. Lan Zhao's lips curled up, and a mocking smile appeared on his beautiful face. If not, Lingxiao College wouldn't have caused such a huge commotion. When they found out that something had happened, they already had this guess. In the end, it was really, you fought with him? Diwu Zhangze asked anxiously. Dugu Maobao paused. Not really. After the sky shuttle array was destroyed, you repaired it. After that, I came back immediately. This injury was left behind because he didn't defend himself against the counterattack of the other party's power. Fortunately, it wasn't life-threatening. Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao were both shocked. Sky shuttle array. You asked that girl to repair it. As Lan Xiao spoke, he suddenly thought of something, and his eyes widened slightly. This is the reason why you asked to memorize those Xian arrays day and night. Dugu Maobao glanced at him expressionlessly, his eyes saying, you just found out. Lan Xiao was instantly dealt a huge blow. You. How old was that girl back then, and you already thought of this? Dugu Mabao, you're already so old, and you're still doing this. How much did you suffer to memorize those things back then? Pfft. You're really shameless. Although she was very talented back then, her level wasn't high enough, and the Xianna rays Dugu Mabao showed her were mostly too profound. In order to memorize those Xianna rays, she put in a lot of effort back then. If not for that, she wouldn't have been able to deal with Lingxiao College's disaster. Dugu Mabao looked indifferent. The college will be hers sooner or later. Protecting Lingxiao is also her responsibility. Although it was still a little early, this matter had long been part of Dugu Mabao's plan. Looking at his self-righteous look, Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao were speechless for a moment. After all, what he said wasn't without reason. Although the process was difficult, the original intention and result were good. From the looks of it, Dugu Mabao was not wrong. It could only be said that it was too strict. Pervert. Only that girl can stand you. Lan Xiao pouted. However, after hearing Dugu Mabao's words, their worries were greatly alleviated. Only one of his hands is hidden under the mountain of myriad wines. It should still be some time before it fully awakens. Dugu Mabao pondered for a moment before looking at the two of them. During this period of time, you two should reconstruct your god bodies as soon as possible. Easy for you to say. Lan Xiao leaned lazily against the metal chain at the side and reached out his hand to lightly knock on the cold and heavy chain. We've been here for so long, and you're the only one who succeeded. Not only that, but they also paid a hefty price. Dugu Mabao's face darkened. Lan Xiao pretended not to see anything and shook his head lazily. Didn't you see that I failed last time? There was too much information in this sentence, so they couldn't react for a moment. You're saying that back then, she did it on purpose? Diwu Zhangze asked dryly. Dugu Mabao narrowed his eyes. Basically, I'm sure. Anne. Rongxiu should know about this too. So, when we asked him back then, he refused to say it directly. Why? Dugu Mabao didn't say anything. Perhaps she was the only one who knew the real reason. Forget it, that girl has always had her own opinions. She must have her own reasons for doing this. Lan Xiao, on the other hand, was very open-minded. He smiled and raised his eyebrows. The next time we see her, we'll ask her personally. Won't everything be clear then? Diwu Zhangze suddenly frowned, and his expression became serious. His reaction immediately attracted the attention of the other two. What's wrong? Dugu Mabao asked. Diwu Zhangze rarely showed such an expression. Seriousness, suspicion, confusion, worry. Diwu Zhangze raised his eyes, looked at the two, and said word by word, the people from Black Demon Cave seem to have entered the god-slaying tomb. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Besides, this armor is about to be completed. I'd better finish it directly. It's about to be completed. Shengguan Jing looked surprised. Rongxiu nodded. When this piece is polished, it's basically completed. Shengguan Jing was stunned for a while. Rongxiu said before that he wanted to create an armor that was more powerful than the pure gold sacred armor. Then it had to be a king artifact, right? But why did Rongxiu say it so easily? A little later, I may have to trouble you to help take care of you, Rongxiu raised his chin. I'll go over there and finish the last part. Triggering Tianlei would definitely cause a big commotion. He didn't want to disturb her. Shengguan Jing nodded hesitantly. Rongxiu's expression was way too calm, so he couldn't even say anything that worried him. This man always seemed to be calm. No matter what kind of situation he faced, he could easily deal with it. After about 4 hours, the moon was in the middle of the sky. Rong Xiu picked up the polished black gold spirit stone in his hand and stood up. He was about to walk forward when a young woman's voice suddenly came from not far away. This is the Scarlet Soul Forest. It doesn't look very good. Digression, these few days, the update time has been more casual, so today's update will end here. I won't let everyone wait any longer. Tomorrow at 12:05 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1626. The woman's voice was very young, with an undisguised arrogance and coquettishness. It was as if she really did not put the Scarlet Soul Forest in her eyes. Rong Xiu's gaze turned, and he lightly glanced in the direction of the voice. About 100 feet away from them, a group of people seemed to have just arrived. The one who spoke was a woman in a light yellow dress. She looked to be in her early 20s and had a petite figure. Her long hair hung down to her calves and fluttered gently in the wind. She looked rather fairy-like. Of course, one had to ignore her voice and the look of disgust in her eyes as she looked at the Scarlet Soul Forest. Beside her stood a well-built man. He looked to be in his late 20s, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was handsome. He was much taller than the woman. When the two of them stood together, the contrast was great. Behind them stood two old men. They were dressed in black and white robes. Their hair was white and they looked rather old. However, the aura on their bodies was obscure and powerful, making them not to be underestimated. There are so many places in the Divine Ruins world to train, why did Father choose this place? This forest looks so disgusting. The woman stretched out her slender white hand and covered her mouth and nose. Her slender eyebrows were slightly knitted. In order to come to this damned place, they had spent a lot of effort. Originally, she did not have much hope, but when she arrived, she realized that it was even more annoying than she had imagined. The white-robed old man standing behind her smiled and said, "Second miss, we are a little late. This Scarlet Soul Forest is filled with poisonous gas. If you come here during the day, the scenery of this Scarlet Soul Forest is actually not bad. Moreover, the patriarch asked you to come with good intentions, didn't he? But I don't want to come." The woman interrupted the white-robed old man's words and crossed her arms. "Isn't it because that thing is here? But it doesn't have to be me and Big Brother coming personally. There are so many people at home who are idle, can't they just send a few people?" Originally, her life at home was quite comfortable. Who knew that her father would suddenly send her here, not even giving her a chance to refute? The white-robed old man smiled embarrassedly. The black-robed old man's face was cold and solemn. Seeing this, he spoke, "Second miss, that thing is extremely important to you. The patriarch said that he still hopes that you can find it and bring it back yourself. That way, you can also convince everyone." His tone was much harsher and colder than the white-robed old man from before. When the woman heard him speak, she unconsciously lowered her arm. However, she still felt uncomfortable in her heart, so she raised her voice slightly and said angrily, "I'm the second young miss of the family. Even if I don't come personally, who dares to do anything to me?" He wasn't interested in the background and identity of these people. As for what they were looking for in the god-slaying tomb, he didn't want to know at all. "I still have something to do. Goodbye." He still had to rush to refine the armor for you, and didn't want to waste a single second on irrelevant people. Nanya Xing didn't expect the other party to not give him any face and felt very embarrassed. He was born noble and no one had ever given him such a face in front of him. "Ha, how arrogant!" he sneered. "Eldest young master, do you want to?" the white-robed elder asked tentatively. Although they didn't say the most important thing just now, that man still heard a lot. It was strange that this person appeared outside the Red Soul Forest in the middle of the night. They should really ask properly. Nan-ee reluctantly retracted her gaze when she couldn't see that figure anymore. She happened to hear the white-robed elder's words and her expression changed. "Elder Bai Tong, what do you mean by this? He was just passing by and I didn't say anything important just now. Why are you making a fuss over nothing?" Elder Bai Tong was stunned by the sudden reprimand. Why was second miss so angry all of a sudden? This. Of course it's because our mission is important and can't be easily known to outsiders. What if? It's clearly because we didn't notice that someone was here. Why are you blaming others in the end? Nan-ee frowned. In short, we can't find trouble with them. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1627. Elder Bai Tong didn't know what to say, so he shut his mouth in embarrassment. Nan Yuxing frowned and looked at Nan-ee with a scrutinizing gaze. Why are you speaking up for that person? This sister of his had been pampered since she was young. Normally, even the people in the family who wanted to hear a good word from her might not have the qualifications to do so. And that young man was just a stranger. It was really inconceivable that she would say such words. Nan-ee's face heated up from his stare. She looked away and said guiltily, "I'm not speaking up for him. I'm not speaking up for him, I'm just telling the truth. Big brother, have you forgotten that before we left, Father repeatedly told us not to casually stir up trouble outside?" Nan Yuxing looked at her speechlessly. It was hard for her to remember this. Unfortunately, she seemed to have forgotten that Father had specially said these words to her. He didn't provoke us first. Why do we have to find trouble with him? Nan-ee pursed her lips. When that man looked over, his gaze was extremely indifferent and he didn't even look at her. "I'm tired. I want to rest." Nan Yuxing could only shake his head helplessly at Nan-ee's words. All right. Let's not pursue the matter, right? You're right. We're already in the Red Soul Forest and will be able to enter the God-slaying tomb tomorrow morning. It's indeed better to avoid trouble. He looked around and pointed at a certain spot. Let's go there and rest first. Then, the few of them walked over. As they walked, Nan-ee looked back a few times. Unfortunately, the night was dark and she couldn't see that elegant figure dressed in white. She retracted her gaze in disappointment and sat down behind a large rock with Nan Yuxing. Nan Yuxing glanced at her from the corner of his eye and his eyes darkened. How could Nan-ee's thoughts escape his eyes? She wasn't being kind. It was most likely that she had taken a fancy to that man just now. Nan Yuxing frowned. Actually, Nan-ee was already of marriageable age, but she was very playful and didn't take a fancy to any of the men that her family wanted to introduce her to. There was once when her father wanted to arrange a marriage for her, but in the end, she still ruined it. Later on, her father simply let her go and stopped caring about these things. He was just waiting for her to settle down. She didn't expect that she would actually take a fancy to a man whose identity she didn't even know, outside the Scarlet Soul Forest. Of course not. Nan Yuxing sat cross-legged, tapping his fingers on his knees. If she was just a little bit moved, then so be it. If he really did something because of this, he would have to think about it again. Elders, did you see that person's strength just now? Nan Yuxing asked after pondering for a moment. The two elders looked at each other and shook their heads. His aura is hidden very deeply. He must have used some kind of divine artifact to conceal it. Nan Yuxing paused. The two elders' eyesight was extremely good. Even they could not see through it. This proved that the other party did have some skills. Besides, both parties were so close to each other just now, but they didn't even notice the existence of that man. If he hadn't happened to look up and see, in short, that man was not to be underestimated. You have to be careful when you're outside, Nan Yuxing said. Besides, we're going to enter the god-slaying tomb tomorrow. We can't make any mistakes. The two elders' expressions turned solemn. Yes. Besides, since he's here, it's very likely that he's here for the god-slaying tomb. Tomorrow, we must act separately from him. Yes. Nanny pouted in dissatisfaction. Big brother, why? Nan Yuxing glanced at her. What do you think? We're not here to play. He should help her find that thing as soon as possible and go home. Nanny was instantly discouraged. No matter how arrogant, domineering, and presumptuous she was, she knew how important this matter was. She couldn't be careless. Every time her big brother spoke in such a tone, she knew that she couldn't continue to make trouble. Got it. She lowered her eyes and pursed her lips. It didn't matter if she didn't see him. Anyway, she had already remembered that person's appearance. Although she couldn't see his appearance clearly, such a prideful person must be very famous. As long as she asked around, she wouldn't have to worry about not knowing his identity. Thinking of this, she suppressed the restlessness in her heart. Seeing that she was finally willing to listen, Nan Yuxing nodded in satisfaction. All right, it's already very late today. Everyone, hurry up and rest. Boom. A loud roar suddenly sounded in the sky. The few of them immediately raised their heads to look. Dark clouds quickly gathered in the night sky, and the bright moon was quickly covered up. Then, a bright, silver, snake-like Tianlei appeared behind the clouds. This instant of light was like a knife that ruthlessly tore through the dark night. Elder Bai Tong suddenly said. Look! That person seems to be preparing to refine a yuan item. The few of them looked over, and only then did they see that the white-clothed man they had just met had actually walked to a relatively spacious and flat area in the distance and stood there. Above his head was the place where Tianlei had appeared. There were piles of rocks here, and the night was dark, so they didn't see him just now. Nanny was delighted at first, but then she looked at the elder in black and asked in confusion. Elder Wu Peng, is he really going to refine a weapon? Elder Wu Peng was a weapon refiner, so he naturally had more say in this. As expected, although Elder Wu Peng's expression was still cold, he still nodded. I didn't expect him to be a weapon refiner. Elder Wu Peng, can you tell what level he is? Nanny asked curiously. Elder Wu Peng looked up at the sky and pondered for a moment. I can't be completely sure yet. However, this person's speed of triggering Tianlei is extremely fast. I think he should be quite capable. Nanny's eyes lit up. Rumble. Soon, the heavenly lightning in the sky rapidly gathered. After a while, countless Tianlei appeared in the sky, almost forming a sea of lightning. This is at least a high-grade divine artifact, right? Nanny asked curiously. Although she wasn't a weapon refiner, she had seen many weapon refinement scenes since she was young, so she was quite experienced. Elder Wu Ping nodded. It's just refining a high-grade divine artifact. What's there to see? Nan Yuxing was very unhappy to see Nanny's reaction and immediately pulled a long face. Nanny snorted. There's nothing much to see, but he's a weapon refiner after all. Just this point alone makes you much stronger than me. He didn't look old either. A high-level weapon refiner in his 20s was considered pretty good in their family. At this moment, Elder Wu Ping suddenly took a step forward with a bewildered expression. Nanny asked curiously. Elder Wu Ping, what's wrong? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1628. As she looked, she turned back to look. She saw that the man in white had taken out a few stones that glowed with a faint golden light. Those stones were of the same size and shape, and they were arranged in a row. Upon closer inspection, she could even see that there seemed to be black veins inside. Nanyushing was also shocked when he saw it clearly. Ink gold spirit stones. Elder Wu Ping nodded. The rest of them looked at each other. This thing was extremely precious. How could this man take out so many of them at once? Moreover, they were used to refine weapons. So many ink gold spirit stones. What kind of divine weapon is he refining? Nanyushing frowned slightly. He had only been suspicious before, but now, he was basically certain that this man's identity was extraordinary. Elder Wu Ping did not say anything. His eyes were fixed on that spot. Perhaps influenced by the atmosphere, the rest of them fell silent at the same time. After placing the 8 ink gold spirit stones, Rong Xiu looked up at the sky. Tianlei was gathering and swimming wildly. The next moment, he gently closed his eyes. There was a brief silence. Following that, countless bolts of lightning came crashing down from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Tianlei came crashing down. They hit the ink gold spirit stones hard. Sparks flew everywhere. His figure was almost completely swallowed by the dazzling light. He's not refining a high-grade divine weapon. Seeing this, Elder Wu Ping finally spoke in a deep voice. His tone was firm. He's refining a king divine weapon. The rest of them did not say anything. Actually, even if he did not say anything, they could tell. How could refining a high-grade divine weapon cause such a commotion? It was rare for them to see such a young king divine weapon refiner. He's quite capable, Nanyushing narrowed his eyes. But why does he want to refine weapons here? Refining a king divine weapon required a lot of time and energy. Even a king divine weapon refiner could not guarantee that he would succeed every time. Under normal circumstances, they would choose a quiet and safe place in advance and find someone to stand guard for them to ensure that they would not be disturbed before they officially began refining. One had to know that once the refining process was disturbed by external factors, the failure of refining was a small matter. If it caused a backlash to the refiner, it would be terrifying. But this man actually directly refined weapons outside of the Scarlet Soul Forest just like that. Was it because he was too ambitious, or did he have full confidence in himself? Arrogance. Nanyushing made a judgment in his heart. He had lived for so many years, and with his special status, he had seen many proud people. Even he himself was one of them. But, the man in front of him was still more frivolous and arrogant than most people he had met. Even if the other party didn't say much to them from beginning to end. But he could still feel the arrogance in the other party's bones. This made him very unhappy. A weapon refining king at this age should be quite famous in the divine ruins world. Why don't I have any impression of him? Nanyushing searched his mind for a while, but he still couldn't find the right person. Elder Wu Ping, can you guess this person's identity? Elder Wu Ping shook his head. Either the other party disguised his appearance, or, he's a newly advanced weapon refining king. He paused for a moment, and hesitated a little. Actually, in his opinion, both of these situations were unlikely. What kind of person could disguise himself as such a talented and magnificent person? If an ordinary person wanted to disguise themselves, they would basically go in the direction of keeping a low profile. Who would do the opposite? Anyone who saw this appearance would never forget it. Then what was he after? As for the second guess, to a certain extent, it was even more ridiculous. He was a weapon refiner himself, so he could naturally see the other party's proficiency and ease. This was definitely not the strength and state that a newly advanced weapon refining king should have. There's another possibility. he concealed his true strength in the past. Only in this way can we explain many things that don't make sense. That's why he deliberately refined weapons here. Nanyi came to a realization. There's basically no one here, so he specially chose this place. It's just that he definitely didn't expect to meet us. This was really a coincidence. The Scarlet Soul Forest actually circled around the God-slaying mound, but they just had to meet in this place. If this wasn't a coincidence, then what was? Hearing this, Nan Yuxing was slightly relieved. It seemed like this white-clothed man had indeed come here to find a convenient place to refine weapons. He didn't want to expose his identity, and they didn't want to interact with him. This way, both sides would mind their own business, which was not a bad thing. More importantly, it usually took a very long time to refine a king artifact. The shortest was a month, and the longest was half a year. He had even heard of someone who spent a full 3 years just to refine a king divine weapon. This showed how troublesome this matter was. If this was the case, when they passed through the Scarlet Soul Forest and entered the God-slaying mound tomorrow, this man would probably still stay here. Then, they wouldn't have to bother to separate from him. At this moment, another loud noise came from the sky. Several Tianlei appeared one after another. Nan Yuxing's expression changed slightly. Wasn't this person a little too fast to trigger the Tianlei? Enveloped by the light, Rongxiu's eyes were still closed, and his expression didn't change. He raised his arms slightly, and his slender and fair fingers clenched into the air. The 8 black gold spirit stones started to fuse rapidly under the bombardment of the Tianlei. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1629. The incomparably hard ink gold spirit stone seemed to have become exceptionally soft in his hands, allowing him to mold it into any shape he wanted. When these ink gold spirit stones fused with each other, the faintly discernible black patterns inside also began to gradually connect with each other. A majestic aura was faintly emitted. How is his refining speed so fast? Elder Baitong also realized that something was wrong and hurriedly looked at Elder Wu Peng. It wasn't that they hadn't seen the scene of refining a king divine weapon before, but the current situation was truly beyond their expectations. Elder Wu Peng's brows were also furrowed. In fact, he had already noticed the abnormality just now, but he wasn't too sure. After all, even if he came personally, he might not be so fast. But now that the truth was right in front of him, he had to believe it even if he didn't want to. After a long silence, he said in a deep voice, "Even if it's a blacksmith of the same level, there will be a difference in strength due to the difference in talent and experience. Perhaps he has already tried many times before, which is why he can do it so easily today." A trace of doubt appeared on Elder Baitong's face. This isn't possible, right? What kind of background does he have to be able to take out so many ink gold spirit stones to practice? One had to know that if the refining failed, those materials would become a pile of trash. Elder Wu Peng pursed his lips. Of course, he knew this too. But other than that, he really couldn't think of a better reason. He had seen many blacksmithing geniuses, but they definitely wouldn't be able to do this. This person is not simple. Nan Yuxing pondered for a long time and gave a vague answer. At first, he didn't take the other party seriously, but now that he looked at it again, he had to admit that this person was indeed capable. He just didn't know what this identity was. Nanyi glanced at him and asked excitedly, "Big brother, why don't we ask him after he finishes refining? It's rare to see such a young blacksmith. If we can be on good terms with him, it'll be good for us too, right?" How could Nan Yuxing not know what she was thinking? He only glanced at her indifferently. "Don't worry about these things. The only thing you have to do now is to enter the god-slaying tomb and find that thing." Nanyi pursed her lips. She had repeated this matter so many times that her ears were about to grow calluses. She snorted and looked in that direction again. Even though Zhang Xian didn't know the other party's identity, the fact that he was able to become a king of blacksmiths meant that the other party's clan couldn't be too weak. Moreover, he was such an outstanding person. As long as he inquired a little, he would definitely be able to obtain a lot of information. Father always said that she was too picky. But in this world, there was indeed such a perfect and flawless person. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1630. Tianlei had completely fallen, and the dark clouds had dispersed. The flames around him also dissipated bit by bit. Only the armor in front of him was left shining brightly. Although the armor was enveloped by a ball of light, outsiders couldn't see it clearly. However, that vast and powerful aura was impossible to ignore. Elder Wu Peng and the others fell into a dead silence. They all knew very well that it was indeed a King Divine weapon. This man actually, really only used one day. No. In just one night, he had crafted an Emperor artifact. Although they were already mentally prepared, when they really witnessed everything with their own eyes, the shock in their hearts was still indescribable. Rong Xiu waved his wrist lightly, and that ball of light fell into his hand and disappeared. At this moment, the sky was about to brighten, and the surroundings were shrouded in a faint layer of fog, making it hazy. Dressed in white, he stood in the misty fog, looking even more like an immortal, elegant and outstanding. Nan Yi was a little stunned. At this moment, he suddenly turned around and walked over. His footsteps were light and calm, but every step seemed to be stepping on Nan Yi's heart. Nan Yi subconsciously held her breath, and her entire body tensed up. His heart thumped wildly, and his face seemed to be on fire. She had never thought that a man who she couldn't even see clearly could control her emotions so easily. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Nan Yuxing looked at Nan Yi and saw her staring blankly ahead. He wanted to speak. However, when the words were about to come out of his mouth, he suddenly couldn't say it. He had never seen his sister reveal such an expression for anyone before. Although he was usually a little strict with her, he still doted on her in his heart. If she really liked him. As long as the other party had a decent background, such good looks, and talent as a weapon refiner, she might consider him. At the thought of this, he took a step forward and cupped his hands politely. "Sir, please wait." Rong Xiu didn't stop, as if he didn't hear him at all. Nan Yuxing frowned. This man did have the right to be arrogant. But it wouldn't be good if he went overboard. He took a few steps forward and blocked Rong Xiu's path. Rong Xiu then stopped, looked up, and glanced at the other man. Nan Yuxing's heart skipped a beat. This man's eyes were deep and serene, like a bottomless cold lake. And this gaze was extremely cold and indifferent. It was as if the person standing in front of him was not a living person, but an insignificant object. This gaze made Nan Yuxing very uncomfortable. However, he was no longer a greenhorn, so he could still control his emotions. The smile on his face did not change. "Your Excellency, please don't misunderstand. We have no ill intentions. I am Nan Yuxing. Seeing that you are already a king of blacksmiths at such a young age, I am very impressed. I wonder if we can be friends. In the future." "No need." Before he could finish, Rong Xiu had already given him a straightforward answer. After saying that, Rong Xiu took a step, bypassed him, and continued to move forward. Nan Yuxing was still in a daze. It was rare for him to take the initiative to build a relationship with someone, but he was rejected. Usually, countless people wanted to talk to him and make friends with him, but they might not have the chance. This man actually, he was so angry that he laughed and turned around. You are so arrogant. Although he was laughing, the sarcasm in his words couldn't be clearer. Rong Xiao didn't even stop in his tracks. Nan Yuxing finally couldn't maintain his expression. Before he could flare up, Nan Yi had already rushed forward. You! Wait! She jogged over and quickly rushed in front of Rong Xiao. A change finally appeared in Rong Xiao's indifferent expression. His brows furrowed slightly, and a hint of impatience appeared between his brows. Nan Yi looked up and saw his face. For a moment, her mind was almost blank. Previously, she hadn't been able to see his face clearly, but now that they were only a few steps apart, she could see him clearly. His sharp eyebrows reached his temples, his phoenix-like eyes were as deep as the sea, his nose bridge was high, and his crimson lips were like the first color of spring. It was clearly an extremely cold and distant face, but there was a hint of spring in it. For a moment, he was as cold as a fairy, but in the blink of an eye, he was as charming as a demon. He could really be called a peerless beauty in the world. Suddenly, the words that Nan Yi had prepared were stuck in her throat and she couldn't say them. This face had such a huge impact on her that she didn't notice the impatience in Rong Xiao's eyes. Move aside. Rong Xiao spoke. His voice was as cold as ice, but it also had a noble aura that couldn't be disobeyed. Almost instinctively, Nan Yi took a step to the side. Seeing this scene, Nan Yuxing was furious. His sister had always been fearless. Their entire family treated her like the apple of their eye, afraid that she would be aggrieved if they bumped into her. In the end, not only did this man not give her any face, he even directly ordered her to move aside. Nan Yuxing's figure flashed. In the blink of an eye, he appeared beside Nan Yi. He pulled Nan Yi behind him and took a step forward with a sneer. Is the king of weapon refinement really so amazing? We are kind enough to befriend you, why do you have to be so high and mighty? He had only given Yi some face because she liked him. Unfortunately, the other party didn't seem to appreciate it. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Rong Xiao didn't have any patience for outsiders, let alone these people who had once wanted to find trouble with him. He finally looked straight at Nan Yuxing. At this moment, Nan Yuxing suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Rong Xiao's expression was languid, and his voice was extremely indifferent. You've delayed my visit to my wife. Every word and sentence was filled with chilling intent. Digression. Has everyone seen the news of the change in monthly votes? To put it simply, you will have to spend more Xiaoxiang dollars to get a monthly vote in the future. Moreover, each person can only give a maximum of 5 monthly votes to a book every month. There is also a limit to the number of votes per day. Non-top scorers are allowed 2 votes per day, and top scorers are allowed 5 votes per day. But the limit is 5 votes per month. If you have monthly votes, please vote as soon as possible. The change will be official in 3 days. You won't be able to bury February with a handful of monthly votes anymore. The star of monthly votes will also be changed to the star of reviews. Mwah. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1631. A coldness surged from the bottom of his heart, causing Nan Yuxing to feel cold all over. However, Nan Yi's attention was on a certain word. Madam. He was already married. Nan Yi's heart instantly turned cold, as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. Rong Xiao. At this moment, a clear female voice sounded from behind. Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi saw the man who had spoken coldly and mercilessly to them just a moment ago, looking straight ahead. In an instant, the frost in his eyes melted rapidly. What replaced it was an unconcealable gentleness. His scarlet lips curved slightly, and there seemed to be a stream of light flickering in his deep phoenix eyes. The aura around him also became completely different. You're awake. As he spoke, he directly walked past the brother and sister and walked over. A faint cold fragrance swept past her nose. Nanny turned around in a daze and looked in the direction he had gone. Not far away, behind a few stones stood a woman. That woman was dressed in a red dress and looked to be only 17 or 18 years old. Her skin was as fair as snow. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her eyes were as bright as the stars. She was only dressed in a simple red dress, and her black hair was simply tied up. There were no extra accessories on her body, and as she stood there, she seemed to be more beautiful than a myriad of magnificent scenes. There was a smile on her lips, but her entire body was enveloped in an incomparably noble aura, revealing a noble aura from her bones. In this misty white fog, she appeared especially beautiful and devastatingly beautiful. The moment she saw the other party's face clearly, Nanny was stunned at first, then she couldn't help but feel sour and jealous in her heart. She had always flaunted her beauty, but in front of this woman, it was the first time she felt ashamed of her inferiority. Even if she didn't want to admit it, she knew very well that the other party's beauty was indeed much better than hers. Nanny couldn't help but look down at herself. Her clothes were luxurious and she was particular about everything. But at this moment, in contrast to the other party, she started to feel that her outfit was very cumbersome. Even when she lowered her head, the jingling dangling hair ornament on her head made her feel vexed. She was dressed up so exquisitely, but it was not as moving as the other party's bare face. Any woman would feel uncomfortable. Rong Xiao had already walked over and tucked the strands of hair by her cheek behind her ear. His movements were skillful and natural. He looked at the person in front of him, his voice low and pleasant. "Did you rest well? Did I disturb you?" Chu Luiyue shook his head and smiled. "No. Actually, I woke up when you were refining just now." Rong Xiao frowned slightly and glanced at Sheng Wanjing behind him. Sheng Wanjing shrugged helplessly. With such a huge commotion, even a barrier wouldn't be able to stop it. Originally, before Rong Xiao prepared to refine, he was worried that he would disturb her rest, so he specially set up a layer of enchantment. But from the looks of it now, it should be useless. She had always been sensitive to these things, so it was impossible for her not to have noticed it. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and a smile appeared in his eyes. He took out a ball of light and handed it over. "Take a look." Chu Luiyue took the item, and a hint of surprise flashed across her eyes. She knew that Rong Xiao was extremely talented in refining weapons. It wasn't that the two of them had never competed in this aspect before. But she basically lost. Moreover, she had never tested Rong Xiao's true strength. This was the first time she had seen Rong Xiao refine an Emperor Divine weapon with her own eyes. Others might not be able to see it clearly, but this thing was in her hands now, so she could see it clearly. It was a suit of armor. The entire body was a faint golden color, but the texture looked more like jade, but it was extremely light in the hand. "You can drip blood directly to recognize it as your master," Rong Xiao said. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly, took out a dagger, and cut her palm. Dark red blood immediately gushed out. It dripped on the armor. The armor flickered with light, and the blood was quickly swallowed and absorbed, disappearing on the surface of the armor. Extremely thin blood-colored patterns appeared inside. In an instant, Chu Luiyue sensed that there seemed to be some kind of connection between her and the armor. After that, with a flash of light, the armor quickly disappeared. Chu Luiyue blinked. The wound on her hand quickly healed, leaving only a faint pink scar. A faint layer of golden light enveloped Chu Luiyue's body, but it quickly disappeared. But she knew very well that the armor had already recognized her as its master. Then, she seemed to have sensed something, and her eyes widened slightly as she looked at Rong Xiao. "Do you like it?" Rong Xiao asked with a smile. Chu Liuyue's words were suddenly stuck in her throat. After a moment, she nodded seriously. I like everything you give me. The scene of the two talking and laughing as if there was no one else around deeply provoked Nanyi. She couldn't help but take a step forward. You gave her the king divine weapon that you worked so hard to refine so easily. A cold glint flashed across Rong Xiao's eyes. Chu Liyue blinked and looked at the other party for the first time. In fact, she had seen and heard the scene of the siblings blocking Rong Xiao just now. It was obvious that this woman had taken a fancy to Rong Xiao. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so unforgiving. And you? Do you know how much effort he put in to refine this? You actually accepted it with a clear conscience. As if sensing Chu Liyue's gaze, Nanyi directly aimed the cannon at Chu Liyue. No matter what, that was a king divine weapon. She gave it away so easily. Looking at Nanyi's agitated and resentful appearance, Chu Liyue was a little amused. She raised her brows and was about to speak, but Rong Xiao had already turned around. Firstly, this is a divine weapon that I refined. It's my business how I want to deal with it. Since when is it your turn to interfere? Nanyi shuddered from his cold gaze and her rebuttal became softer. But, secondly, this is a gift that I specially prepared for Madam. If I don't give it to her, do I have to give it to you? Rong Xiao enunciated every word, and his face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. Being stared at by his intimidating gaze, Nanyi finally sensed a trace of danger. She opened her mouth but didn't say anything. Nan Yuxing was angry and heartbroken. He immediately stepped forward and stared at her warningly before pulling her behind him. His sister was used to being arrogant and spoke as she pleased. Even he felt embarrassed when he heard what she said just now. But this was his sister after all. How could he let her be bullied when she was outside? Nan Yuxing took a deep breath. My sister didn't mean that. You, Rong Xiao didn't have any patience with the siblings and directly interrupted him. He stared coldly at Nanyi. Thirdly, who do you think you are? How dare you criticize my wife? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. If he killed or crippled someone, it's not his fault. Why did you hit him? Nanyi bit her lip and looked at Chu Liyue with resentment. The look in his eyes was very clear. If there was someone to blame, it should be her. If it wasn't for protecting her, he definitely wouldn't have done this. Chu Liyue. She hadn't even said a single word from the start to the end, and this hat was actually placed on her head? How could Nan Yuxing not know what his sister was thinking? It was nothing more than reluctance. Nan Yuxing really expected better from her. His words were already so harsh and his attitude was so clear, but she still refused to come to her senses. At this time, she was still speaking up for him. What the hell? He originally wanted Nanyi to step back and make a move himself. However, Nanyi hugged his arm tightly and refused to let go. Nan Yuxing was angry and frustrated. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and hit Nanyi's head hard. You! In the past, he only thought that she was a little delicate and willful, but he didn't know that she could go to such an extent for a man. He was really disappointed. The atmosphere between the siblings fell into a stalemate. Eldest young master, second Mississippi. It's daybreak and the poisonous gas in the Scarlet Soul Forest has dissipated. It's time to go in. Elder Wu Ping spoke at the right time to break the stalemate. Elder Bai Tong also hurriedly acted as a peacemaker. Yes, yes. The time it takes to pass through the Scarlet Soul Forest is very short. Young master, miss, we have to hurry. The two of them said this to give them a way out. Nan Yuxing grabbed Nan Yi's wrist and headed in the direction of the Scarlet Soul Forest. Let's go. They were here because they had something important to do. As for that man who didn't know what was good for him, when everything was over, they would think of a way to deal with him. Nan Yi's wrist hurt from being grabbed and she frowned. However, she knew that her elder brother was angry at this moment and didn't dare to say anything. She could only follow them. The two elders also followed one after the other. When the two sides brushed past each other, Elder Wu Ping gave Rongxiu a meaningful look. Rongxiu's expression was indifferent and calm, as if he didn't take them seriously at all. Chu Luyue blinked and looked at the few people's back view. Rongxiu was considered famous in the Divine Ruins world and many big shots had seen him before. These two people seemed to be of high status, but they didn't seem to know Rongxiu. What are you thinking about? Rongxiu's voice sounded. Chu Luyue looked back thoughtfully. Nothing, I just feel that their background doesn't seem simple. The four of them concealed their auras very well, but her intuition told her that they shouldn't be weak. More importantly, they had witnessed Rongxiu refining a king divine weapon with their own eyes, but they didn't seem to be very shocked. One had to know that the people from the major sects and families had directly fallen out with Lingxiao College in order to fight for the Scarlet Heaven Sword and Blue Feathers Abyss. At that time, they had thought that the Scarlet Heaven Sword was a king divine weapon. It could be seen how important and noble a king divine weapon was to these people, so much so that they would pay a huge price to fight for it. But these people, from the beginning to the end, they didn't seem to covet the king divine weapon at all. In this situation, they either knew that they couldn't win, so they didn't even have any thoughts about it, or, this thing wasn't that precious to them. Judging from their arrogant attitude, it shouldn't be the first case. But if it was the second case, then it would be interesting. Chu Luyue had been in the Divine Ruins world for a long time and knew that king divine weapons were extremely precious to many families, even first-rate families. What kind of background did these people have? They were actually like this, that black-clothed old man should be a weapon refining supremacy. Shengguan Jing retracted his gaze and muttered. Just now, he had been staying behind a few stones, and the conflict had been between Rongxiu and Chu Luyue, so those people didn't pay much attention to him. A weapon refining supremacy is the follower of those two. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Interesting. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. We're just going to pass through the Red Soul Forest and enter the God-slaying tomb. We're not in the mood to continue arguing with you. Nan Yuxing's face turned ugly. That man's words were extremely unpleasant, but he didn't expect this woman to be the same. She had a sharp tongue and didn't know what was good for her. He clenched his fists and his voice was even colder. You're going in too. The God-slaying tomb is extremely dangerous. Why are you going there for no reason? He had thought that they had specially come to this deserted place to refine Emperor Divine weapons, but now it seemed that it wasn't the case. Chu Luyue almost laughed out loud. Are the Red Soul Forest and the God-slaying tomb your territory? Only you can enter, and others can't. Isn't this too unreasonable? Nan Yuxing was speechless. He was indeed in no position to stop the fun here. But Nan Yi suddenly crossed her arms and sneered. Of course it's because there's something wrong with you. We were about to pass through the Red Soul Forest and enter the God-slaying tomb, but you followed us. The God-slaying tomb is vast and there are countless places to enter. Why did we meet you here? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? As long as she wasn't fighting with Rongxiu, her combat strength wasn't weak. Moreover, she had already regarded Chu Luyue as her enemy in her heart. When they spoke, it was naturally tit for tat. Oh, so that's how it is. It does sound reasonable, Chu Luiyue nodded as if she agreed with him and changed the topic. But it seems that we were here first. If there's a problem, it should be you, right? Nanyi was stunned. She wanted to say something, but suddenly remembered that the other party seemed to have been here before they came. It didn't feel good to be in the wrong when they were in the right. Nan Yixing also frowned. So, it was really just a coincidence? Even so, we have to go in from here now. Go somewhere else and don't go with us. His tone was very hard, as if he was ordering someone. Chu Luiyue felt that it was even more interesting. These two siblings seemed to have a screw loose in their heads. She didn't know if it was because they had been in a superior position for a long time and were used to ordering people around, but every word they said could successfully disgust her. Do you usually control the world like this? Chu Luiyue couldn't suppress the curiosity in her heart and asked sincerely. Nan Yixing and the others were embarrassed. So, you don't want to do as I say? Nan Yixing's voice seemed to carry a hint of threat. Chu Luiyue smiled and her eyes curved. She stretched out her hand and pointed at Nanyi, saying very sincerely. Speaking of pestering, isn't it your precious sister who has been pestering my husband? I think the ones who should take the initiative to leave are you, right? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1634. Tuanzi buried its head in her shoulder and rubbed against her. Then it reluctantly let go of her hand. Then you will miss me every day. Chu Luiyue kissed her face. Dumpling jumped down from her arms, snorted at Yu Qian, and turned to leave. Yu Qian looked at Wang Jianfeng. Go and arrange her residence. Yes. In fact, this matter should have been handled by Jin Yunlai. But because of Mu Yafeng's matter, almost all of his authority had been taken away. Even such a matter was handed over to the fifth divine emissary. Chu Luiyue watched Dumpling leave. Yu Qian was obviously worried about her. He had been following behind her, as if he wanted to personally send her back to Fengming Mountain. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes slightly. The light barrier between the illusory god palace and Fengming Mountain fell from the sky, flickering with a faint glow. She had always thought that this barrier couldn't be passed, but now it seemed that it didn't cause any obstruction to Dumpling. This was much more convenient. Shangguanyu, come with me. She put away her thoughts and smiled at Wang Jianfeng. Sorry to trouble you, fifth divine emissary. Wang Jianfeng didn't say anything and walked in a certain direction. Chu Luiyue immediately followed. When he passed by Jin Yunlai, he suddenly said, Wait. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and turned to look at him. Seventh divine emissary. I have a question for you. Jin Yunlai said, staring at her eyes, as if trying to see something from them. The last Xian formation wasn't included in the mythical flame diagram. How did you crack it? This last Xian formation was undoubtedly the most difficult one on the entire star path. Even he had spent a lot of time and energy to barely crack it back then. Even after that, he had spent several years and tried countless times before he finally managed to successfully unleash it. But what about Chu Luiyue? She had only been in the illusory god palace for a few months. From the heaven gate to the illusory god palace, she had deciphered the countless profound formations on this star road one by one. Even though she had seen some of them before, such efficiency was simply too shocking. Or even illusory? Jin Yunlai asked himself. Even now, he might not be able to cast the last Xian formation as quickly and smoothly as her. Chu Luiyue looked at him with clear eyes and a sincere expression. Is that very difficult? Jin Yunlai choked. For a moment, he felt that Chu Luiyue was mocking him. But in the next moment, Chu Luiyue laughed. That profound formation indeed did not appear on the mythical flame diagram because there was no need for it to be included. That Xian formation looked complicated, but in fact, it was just a collection of the Xian formations from before on the Star Road. Since the previous ones could be broken, how difficult would the last one be? Jin Yunlai's heart skipped a beat, and his entire body froze on the spot. Chu Liuyue's lips curved slightly. Without another word, she turned and followed Ruan Jianfeng. Patriarch Nan, let's meet another day. The flesh on Nan Jinchu's face trembled violently. At this moment, Chu Liyue suddenly felt someone's gaze on her. She paused in her steps and looked up. In the distance, in front of the main hall of the illusory god palace, a person was standing with his hands behind his back, looking at her from afar. Jun Zhuqing. When did he come? Most importantly, he seemed to have come from the main hall. However, Jun Zhuqing's expression was different from before. In the past, he always had a smile on his lips, but now, his face was calm and expressionless. He seemed to be looking at her, but his eyes seemed to be unfocused. In short, it felt a little strange. Su Li followed her line of sight and explained softly, Jun Zhuqing entered the main hall of the illusory god palace some time ago, but no one knows what he went there for. They didn't even know why Jun Zhuqing was qualified to enter the main hall. Chu Liyue nodded and retracted her gaze. It seemed that although Jun Zhuqing and Nan Jinshu both had special privileges, Jun Zhuqing was still better. She just didn't know, where did their special privileges come from? In the dark and cramped cell, Dugu Mabao slowly opened his eyes. In the end, this day had still come. Although that person unilaterally tore the contract and caused the time to be brought forward, she didn't disappoint him. Everything that happened before wasn't wasted. In another cell, Lan Xiao was sitting on the ground with one leg bent and leaning against the wall. The air was filled with the faint smell of blood. He lowered his head to take a look. The wound on his arm was already gradually healing. After all, it was a divine body tempered by the golden Tianlei, so it naturally wouldn't be damaged so easily. His recovery ability after injury was also quite good. Looks like it's really soon, he touched his chin and chuckled softly. This chuckle affected the wound at the corner of his mouth, causing him to hiss in pain. He licked his lips and leaned his head slightly against the wall. Although it was dark all around and almost nothing could be seen, there was still a faint glow in his eyes. Chu Liyue and Su Li followed Ruan Jianfeng all the way. Along the way, Su Li would explain to her in a low voice from time to time. She had been here for quite some time and was quite familiar with it. Chu Liyue listened as she walked. Suddenly, she stopped and looked in a certain direction. Where is that? Su Li followed her line of sight. That's the residence of the seventh oracle. Chu Liyue shook her head. No, I'm talking about the courtyard at the back. Su Li was stunned. Ruan Jianfeng suddenly turned around and looked at her. How do you know there's another courtyard there? Chapter 1635. She had too many advantages, like a dazzling pearl. He only wanted to hold her in his hands and monopolize her. Of course, he knew that this was just wishful thinking, because she deserved a wider world and a more prosperous scenery. Then, he could only choose one and say it more obviously. As long as she stood here, she had already won. Why should he waste any more effort? Chu Liyue's eyes flickered when she heard that. She had to admit that when this man said such words, it was always easier to move her heart. Cough. Sheng Wanjing, who had been ignored and never paid attention to, coughed hard. He began to feel that it was a mistake for him to follow them. It was clear that the two of them didn't do anything. They only looked at each other a few times and talked to each other. Today's waist hug was the most intimate action between the two of them during this period of time. It could be said that he had restrained himself to the extreme. However, Shangguan still felt that he was very, very redundant. What a miscalculation. Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue looked over at the same time. At the same time, Rong Xiao's fingertips gently rubbed her back twice, then he tactfully retracted his hand. Chu Luiyue, she gave Rong Xiao a warning look. Control yourself. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows. Am I not restrained enough? Chu Luiyue, Shangguan looked up at the sky. Cough, I think it's about time. Can we prepare to enter the Scarlet Soul Forest? The weather was clear and there were no clouds in the sky. The Scarlet Soul Forest, which looked especially eerie in the darkness last night, looked much more normal now. Black trees stood tall. Occasionally, thick roots would be revealed, and they were also completely black. The red leaves swayed in the wind, like a scene at the end of autumn that was about to wither. However, the strange thing was that there were no leaves on the ground in the forest. Not a single one. In a normal forest, there would be a thick layer of fallen leaves, but here, it was flat and clean. Looking at it like this, it was inevitable that one would find it strange. Let's go. After Shangguan finished speaking, he took the lead and entered. Chu Luiyue glanced at the swaying red leaves. He narrowed his eyes and walked in. Shangguan took the lead, followed by Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiao was one step behind her and was at the end of the line. The soil on the ground was reddish-brown and very soft. Stepping on it would not make any sound. The forest was very quiet. Other than the rustling of the leaves in the wind, there was no other sound. They could even hear each other's breathing. In the Scarlet Soul Forest, one cannot use origin power, nor can one fly. One can only walk forward step by step. As Shangguan walked, he patiently explained some things to pay attention to. Although it's a lot slower, it's safer. To walk through the Scarlet Soul Forest, it would take about 4 hours. We should be able to leave this place before the poison gas spreads again. Chu Luiyue listened from the back and responded obediently. Then, he couldn't help but ask, Taizu, you've been to the God-slaying tomb before. Why, have I never heard you mention it? The point was that he seemed to know this place better than others. What had he experienced here in the past? Taizu pondered for a while before he spoke again. In fact, there's nothing I can't say. It's just that the last time I came here, I didn't have a good memory, so I didn't mention it to you. No one was willing to take the initiative to recall and mention those unhappy memories. This time, if Chu Luiyue had not been forced here by the other party, he would not have mentioned it. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She had never seen Taizu like this. It should be. What happened here really made it hard for him to let go. Taizu, if you don't want to say it, actually, Shangguan waved his hand and suddenly laughed. It's nothing. It's been so many years. He paused for a while before he continued. That year, before I went to the northern region of Untainted Land, the last place I stayed was the God-slaying tomb. Chu Luiyue was a bit shocked. Didn't this mean that Taizu went to the northern region of Untainted Land from here? But these two places were famous for being dangerous in the world of divine ruins. Why did he? When I came to the world of divine ruins, I didn't belong to any sect, but I was arrogant. After I defeated 7 weapon refining supremacies, I became even more famous and attracted many people to follow me, but also caused a lot of hatred. Since I had already established the heavenly order, I naturally didn't want to establish a sect here. I wanted to be alone, so I rejected all the followers. But I met a friend and we had a good chat. He wasn't a weapon refining master, just an ordinary martial artist with average talent. He stayed at the high god level for many years and still couldn't break through. But he was open-minded and I admired him. I heard that he was also a person outside the world of divine ruins and came here alone, so I appreciated him and treated him as a close friend. Later, he heard that there was a supreme treasure in the god-slaying tomb that could help him break through to the god level, so he was a bit eager to try. I heard that this place was dangerous, so I decided to come with him. If I could help him break through to the god level, I would be able to get rid of a knot in his heart. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue had already guessed something. Sure enough, Taizu heaved a long sigh. Unfortunately, I treated him like a close friend, but he was just using me. After we came here, we went through a lot of difficulties and finally found that thing. But whoosh. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew. In the crimson soul forest, a mournful whimper sounded from afar. Digression. See you tomorrow, mobile users. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1636. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. He looked up at the forest, but found that the sound seemed to be coming from all directions, and he couldn't tell where it was coming from. Shengguan Jing frowned and said, "Don't worry. Those are just vengeful spirits in the Scarlet Soul Forest." Vengeful spirits. That's right. The so-called vengeful spirits are the souls of those cultivators who wanted to pass through the Scarlet Soul Forest and enter the god-slaying tomb. Because they were trapped here, they are full of resentment. However, these souls don't have their own will and consciousness. As long as we don't use force, we won't be discovered by them and can pass through safely. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. I see. The whimpering sound was mournful and miserable, as if it was right beside them. When the sound clearly fell into their ears, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. It wasn't hard to imagine how miserable and pitiful these people were when they died in the Scarlet Soul Forest. Fortunately, the three of them were mentally strong and weren't disturbed by the whimpering sound. They continued forward. However, after being disturbed by the sound, Shengguan Jing didn't continue speaking. Chu Luiyue didn't ask any more questions. Taizu had always been free and easy. Chu Luiyue could see that the incident back then had a deep impact on him. So much so that today, 1,000 years later, he still didn't want to mention it. He probably hadn't completely let it go. In fact, it was understandable if he thought about it carefully. At that time, Taizu was alone in the divine ruins world and only regarded this person as a friend. It was almost a trust that he could entrust his life to. However, the other party betrayed him for a treasure. No matter who it was, they wouldn't feel good about such a thing. However, Chu Luiyue still had a small question in his heart. At that time, Taizu was already a venerable artificer. This status was much higher than that of the venerable god and the doctor of the same level. Then, why did that person choose to betray Taizu and kill Taizu just for a treasure that could help a cultivator break through from the high god to the venerable god? On one hand, Taizu had no interest in this thing. On the other hand, even if he obtained the treasure and successfully became a god, he would still be slightly inferior to Taizu. Why did he have to be so decisive? However, since Taizu did not continue, Chu Luiyue did not ask further. For Taizu, every time he mentioned it, it was a process of tearing open the scars of his wounds. She pursed her lips and lowered her eyes. Suppressing the doubts and emotions in her heart, she continued to move forward with Taizu. There were a few times when Chu Luiyue's ears hurt from the sobbing. She even felt that someone was standing beside her, ready to kill her at any time. However, it was precisely because Taizu's reaction was fast and strong that she was even more certain that this was definitely not a good thing. Thinking about how arrogant those people were before they came in. Now that even they were forced to this point, it was obvious that they were in trouble. They were about to get out safely. If they were dragged down by others at this time, Chu Luiyue was not sure if she would have the intention to kill them. However, Because they could not use force in the forest, their speed did not increase by much. On the other hand, Nan Yixing and the rest were already forced into a life-and-death situation. How could they care so much? They only knew how to use their full speed to attack. The distance between the two parties was rapidly shrinking. Chu Luyue could even hear the strange rustling sound behind her. She could not help but look back. The moment she saw it, her pupils immediately shrank. In the forest, Nan Yixing and the rest were fleeing in a sorry state. Nan Yi looked panicked and her face was full of tears. There was also an additional wound on her left shoulder. Although it had been reluctantly bandaged with gauze, a dark red color still seeped out. The two elders were protecting them from behind, but they did not seem to be in good condition either. And behind them, several scarlet leaves were rapidly approaching. Wherever those leaves passed, they actually tore open black spatial cracks. It was as if they would swallow them up at any time. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.